You quit your job. Does that mean you're going to leave me? No, that's not true. Becoming independent is like changing careers. It doesn't mean I won't have any money. You think going independent will work? I doubt it. Maybe you should go independent from me too. Huh? Are you talking about divorce? I won't support someone who's not working. My name is Lisa. I'm 40 years old. I've been working while raising my child. I didn't work after my daughter was born, but I was lucky to get my old job back when she started elementary school. I mainly work from home now. My daughter is in 6th grade, and I think it's time for me to try something new at work. My husband is also 40. When we married, he was a salesman with good prospects. He was confident in his job, but he switched jobs 3 years ago, hoping for a better salary. Instead, his salary went down, his benefits are worse, and he has to work overtime every day. My family lives on a farm in the countryside. My daughter has been helping them in the field since she was little. She loves visiting and working with her grandparents. My parents love doing field work with my daughter, but my husband hates the countryside and never wants to visit my parents' house. I'm going back to my parents' house for a week. How about you? I have work to do, so I'll stay here. I'm finishing up a project. I knew my husband wouldn't come, but we're a family, so I still ask. Even though he's not coming, it's polite to ask. When my daughter and I are at my parents' house, my husband calls me every day. It's fine if he's calling to check on us or show he cares, but he usually calls about trivial things. What should I eat today? Why not eat the leftovers in the fridge? I'm not in the mood for that. Then cook something yourself. Why should I? I'm tired. Yeah, you've worked hard. Where are my clothes? They're in your usual drawer. What's with the folding and cut corners? Well, you're on your own then. My husband has been like this the whole time we've been at my parents' house, so I mostly ignore his calls and messages. He also doesn't like it when we go to my parents' house. When we get back, the house is always filled with garbage. Mom, when we go to Grandpa's house, it always gets so messy. Yes, it does. Why do you always clean up the mess, Mom? He's the one making it. Shouldn't he clean up after himself? Of course. My daughter is also frustrated with my husband's attitude. Even though we're enjoying Grandpa's house, I hate coming home to a dirty house. My daughter feels the same way. Hey, can we leave early from Grandpa's house? Grandpa and Grandma must be tired from working in the fields. I wish I could help out. Thank you. Grandpa and Grandma would love that. My daughter's kindness is a contrast to my husband's selfish behavior. I'm really tired of dealing with his childish ways. After a long vacation, I went to my company to discuss my health, annual assessments, and goals. Inspired by my daughter's comments, I proposed to the president that we use our program to make agriculture more it-oriented. Other companies have been working on this for a while. The president agreed that this is a business that has been around overseas for decades. Japanese companies have been developing new agricultural models for about 10 years. With our data, we can make it work successfully. We already have farmers interested in this model. I see. In the meantime, can you submit a proposal? Sure, I will. I quickly asked my parents to cooperate, and they agreed right away. My daughter's comments about wanting to help her hardworking grandparents gave me a great business idea. A month after I submitted the proposal, my project was approved. I worked hard on it because I was worried about my aging parents. If the project succeeded, it would really help them. But my husband kept trying to discourage me. You've been acting all cheerful lately. I don't like it. Oh, really? Are you getting carried away? I don't know. Your face just demotivates me. Well, if that's the case, you don't have to look at me. I know my husband just wants to make me feel bad. I already feel bad enough, but I try not to show it. I keep my tone normal and treat him as usual. He's always like this. When I'm happy or excited, he tries to hurt me. I'm used to it now, so I don't let it affect me, but it's still frustrating. I can't just not look at you. We live together. That's not true. You can just stay in your room. I can handle my job and take care of our daughter on my own. If you took care of yourself, we wouldn't even need to interact. That's not what I meant. My husband yelled at me. I'm really frustrated. I want to divorce him, but I'm not sure how to explain it to our daughter. I'm stuck, unable to decide. Since I don't react to his words, he starts criticizing the farm. Maybe your inability to understand things is because you grew up on a farm in the countryside. He's being so childish. I try to stay calm, but when he insults my parents, it really gets to me. Still, I'm keeping a cool head this time. For the first time, a project I propose has been accepted, and I'm excited to work on it. My husband's attitude isn't bothering me as much as it used to. So, you're saying I can't do my job because I grew up in the city? You're crossing the line. That's exactly what I'm going to say to you. Don't be a jerk. No, you were the one who started this. We've been arguing like this a lot lately. He used to be a nice guy, but things changed when he switched jobs. My husband and I haven't been getting along, but my work has been going really well. A few months later, I decided to resign from the company after discussing it with them. I made the choice to leave and sign a licensing agreement with the company to become independent. I had told my husband about this plan beforehand, but I guess he didn't really listen because as soon as I resigned, he told me he wanted a divorce. You quit your job. Does that mean you're going to live off me? No, that's not true. Becoming independent is like changing careers. It doesn't mean I won't have any income. You're going independent? Are you kidding me? That's not going to work. Then why don't you go independent from me too? Huh? Divorce? I'm talking about divorce. I'm not going to support someone who isn't working. I was at a loss for words, startled by the sudden mention of divorce. I was thinking about my daughter when she unexpectedly opened the living room door. Mom, get a divorce, she said, even though she should have been asleep. My husband looked briefly upset but quickly defended himself. It's your fault for saying you're quitting your job. He stood in front of our daughter, insisting it wasn't his fault. But my daughter only looked at me, ignoring him completely. Are you sure? I asked her. Yes, I want you to get a divorce. I don't like him. He always says mean things to you, Mom. Don't stay with him because of me. I want you to divorce him right now. We can go live with Grandpa and Grandma. Thank you, I said, touched by her support. But you'll have to change schools. Are you okay with that? Yeah, I'm totally fine with it. Let's go. You don't have to talk to Dad anymore, right? Yeah, I guess so. Well, I guess that's it. We'll talk about the details later. Hey, my husband interrupted. What? I replied, exhausted. It's not my fault, okay? Okay, we'll talk later. I hope you can live a life you won't regret in the future. Huh, I'm not gonna regret it. I'll be free once you guys are gone. I turned my back on my husband, who was still ranting, and left the house with my daughter. Despite my worries, my daughter seemed relaxed at my parents' house. She'd adjusted well after changing schools for the new semester and seemed to be enjoying her new environment. Once she was settled, my husband and I had another discussion about the divorce. He claimed he wouldn't pay alimony because, according to him, I was to blame. Normally, if it were my fault, he'd ask for alimony, but he clearly didn't understand what being liable meant. I will properly charge you alimony, I told him. Huh? Because you're the one who's liable, right? You're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. How can I be liable? I didn't do anything. Exactly, you didn't do anything about the house or our daughter. I was the one struggling while you did nothing, but you sure took care of Mary, didn't you? What? He stammered as I laid out the evidence of his infidelity on the table. How did you get this? You didn't steal my phone, did you? You're being rude. Excuse me? You're the rude one. You're a married man. What were you thinking? And no, I didn't collect this myself. Then how did you get it? You're unemployed. How did you afford a detective? It was our daughter, I revealed. Huh. She's the one who collected all of this. After we separated, she told me she saw you walking arm in arm with a woman she didn't know. She used my laptop to sync your phone and showed me the data. She even encouraged me to divorce you. She hates you. She hates that you're her father. So I can divorce you without a second thought, I said, feeling a mix of anger and relief. I can't believe you let our daughter see those pictures. You're such a lousy father. I laid out all the evidence in front of him. There's no point in making excuses. Your new job was the result of another affair, and you're already paying alimony to that woman's husband. You even lied about your salary being reduced, and I've looked into all of it. At that point, my husband, who had been stubborn and defensive, finally nodded, realizing he was caught. I'm proud to have such a talented daughter, he said, trying to shift the conversation. I'd be happy if she takes over my company in the future, if that's what she wants. Sorry, he muttered. Sorry isn't enough. Let's not avoid the divorce. You don't want to be unemployed, do you? I'm not stopping the divorce. And if you don't pay alimony and child support in a lump sum, I'll go to your company and tell them everything. If you do that, I won't be able to keep my job, he pleaded. Maybe you should start looking for a new one then, I said, standing firm. You're going to regret this for the rest of your life, he threatened. But I knew I wouldn't. My husband tried to ask me for help, but I just smiled and brushed him off. After that, he was reluctant to sign the divorce papers, so I hired a lawyer and let him handle everything. Less than 2 weeks later, we were divorced. My husband didn't want to spend any more money since he was already dealing with 2 alimony cases and paying child support. He knew that hiring a lawyer would push him to the brink of bankruptcy. In the end, my ex-husband paid alimony and child support in one lump sum. He couldn't cover it with his savings, so he went into debt and even informed me, hoping I'd feel sorry for him, but I ignored his pleas. When I filed a claim for alimony against his cheating partner, it led to a huge fight between them, and they broke up. The woman was furious about having to pay alimony, but she eventually agreed. She had to ask her parents for the money, and I heard she moved back to the countryside to help with the family business, where her parents could keep a close eye on her. As for my ex-husband, he couldn't afford the rent on his apartment anymore. He ended up moving into a shabby apartment, struggling to get by. My business has really taken off, and I'm enjoying every day. Things didn't work out with my husband, but I'm glad that what I've learned has been useful for my family's farming business. My parents are thrilled that the IT system has significantly reduced their work hours and lightened their workload. I owe so much of this success to my daughter. I had to let her have a smartphone and tablet when she was in elementary school. At first, I was hesitant, but she's been using them wisely. Her favorite place is still the fields, but she's starting to take an interest in my work. Recently, she's been asking me to teach her how to make a website, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for her. My 12-year-old daughter is truly remarkable, but it saddens me that she had to see a side of her father that no child should have to witness. I hope the adults around her will support and guide her as she grows. Her grandmother is right. I look forward to seeing the amazing things she'll do in the future.
How could you do this to us? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Clara, my daughter-in-law, peered at me over the dining table, eyebrows raised in feigned innocence. Do what, Meredith? My face burned. We were all gathered at Clara and Ethan's luxurious home, one of Clara's over-the-top dinner parties, meant to celebrate my grandson Aiden's acceptance to Columbia University. At least, that's what I thought. You didn't make anything for us? Alan, my husband of 30 years, spoke softly beside me. His eyes held more hurt than anger. But you knew we were coming. Clara laughed lightly, the sound grating against my nerves. Oh, I just didn't have the time today. Anyway, we'll order something later. This party is for Aiden, not you. I bit my tongue, the metallic taste of blood flooding my mouth. Easy, Meredith. Not now. I smiled tightly. Of course, whatever Aiden wants. I watched my grandson, a tall 18-year-old with his father's gentle eyes. He stood surrounded by his rowdy friends, oblivious to the tension. A twinge of sadness caught in my chest. We had helped raise him, Alan and I. We had gifted him his first bicycle, sat beside his hospital bed when he broke his arm skateboarding, and now helped pay those towering college tuition bills. And this was how his mother treated us. Like burdens, unwanted guests. I felt Alan's weathered hand close around mine. We're happy you can provide all this for Aiden, Alan said evenly. Columbia is expensive, though. Let us know if you need. Clara waved a dismissive hand. Oh, please. Ethan makes plenty. Her voice dropped. Certainly more than a school teacher's pension or whatever measly salary comes from working at a library. The room tilted. Our jobs are honest, not something to be ashamed of, I managed. This wasn't the first barb about our average middle-class life. But on tonight of all nights, it stung. Who said anything about shame? Clara's eyes glinted. But let's be real. Your little check isn't making any dent in Columbia's tuition. Maybe if you'd had more to invest when Ethan was young. Clara, that's quite unfair. Ethan finally spoke up from her side, frowning. Mom and Dad help how they can. Clara snorted. Yeah, buy the kid a computer and call it a day. That laptop was top of the line, young lady. We scrimped and saved. Alan sounded properly angry now. Then where is it? Clara challenged. I never see Aiden using it. He loves that computer. I jumped in, though my mind spun wondering the same thing. Where did it go? Aiden was attached to all his electronics. Clara checked the diamond Rolex on her wrist. Look, the catering van will be here soon. Are we done? Done? I fought to steady my voice. Stay calm, Meredith. I suppose we are, for now. I rose on unsteady legs, Alan's strong arm coming around me. We managed strained goodbyes to Ethan before escaping into the cold night air. As Alan's sedan pulled out of the long driveway, tears burned in my eyes. That laptop was only the first of many gifts we'd given Aiden over the years. Gifts from our hearts, not our wallets. And tonight, it had all been thrown back in our faces. What else of ours had Clara tossed aside? The thought made my stomach turn. 30 years of marriage and family life, and one spoiled, greedy woman threatened to tear it all down on a senseless whim. I dashed the bitter tears away as Alan and I drove home in silence through the dark suburban streets. No, I decided, gripping the worn leather seat until my knuckles whitened. This wasn't over yet. I refused to let her win. The next morning, I sipped my coffee, unable to shake Clara's stinging words. My gaze fell on the living room bookshelf lined with framed photos. Birthdays, holidays, Aiden's first lost tooth. Our family moments filled the shelves. Would Clara toss those aside too if she got the chance? We should check in on Aiden, Alan said, sinking into his recliner with the newspaper. Make sure his party went well after we left. I nodded. You're right, I'll video call him later. I rose to clear our mugs. As I rinsed them in the sink, my phone dinged from the counter. A Facebook notification. Frowning, I picked it up. Aiden had posted a new profile picture. I smiled, seeing his handsome grin, his arm slung around a pretty brunette. But my eyes caught on the background. A shiny new laptop sat open behind him. What? I peered closer. The laptop in the photo was sleek, slim, and definitely not the bulky gaming computer we had gifted him. Alan, my voice came out strangled. Come look. He hurried over, face paling when he saw the image. What in blazes? She sold it. I leaned weakly against the counter. She must have, probably for one of her shopping sprees. Since marrying Ethan, Clara had developed a love for fast cars, fancy clothes, exotic getaways, anything to flaunt her wealth, it seemed. Alan's face hardened. I'm calling our son. Snatching up his cell phone, he jabbed at the screen. My heart pounded as I listened to the ringing tone. Dad, everything okay? Ethan sounded distracted when he finally answered. Voices and clinking glasses echoed behind him. He must still be hosting guests. Where's the computer your mother and I gave Aiden? Alan cut right to it. A pause. What? The laptop, Alan insisted. The one we bought him for college prep. Where is it? Oh, that old thing. Ethan seemed to muffle the phone, his voice growing faint. Hey, babe, what happened to that computer my parents gave? His words faded out. I held my breath. Alan's fist clenched white. Finally, Ethan returned. Yeah, Aiden said he hasn't used that one in months. It was getting pretty slow anyway, so Clara bought him an upgrade. Alan exploded. We spent good money on that laptop. Did you sell it for one of her shopping sprees? Some fancy watch or purse for Clara? No, Dad. Ethan sounded shocked by Alan's eruption. The hard drive was failing, Aiden said. Clara got him a solid-state one, much faster processor. It wasn't cheap. Alan deflated on the couch, shaking his head warily. So our gift wasn't good enough, once again. You know how Clara is, always needing the newest and best. Ethan trailed off awkwardly. Yes, we knew exactly how Clara was, greedy, irrational, fixated on status. I squeezed Alan's shoulder as he ended the call. We sat in disheartened silence. Something still didn't sit right within me. That gaming laptop had still been perfectly new. And Aiden loved high-end electronics. He wouldn't neglect a still functional device. There had to be more going on. Over the next week, I observed Clara more closely during our brief interactions. Her behavior raised more red flags, expensive outfits and accessories popping up, recurring emergency expenses that prompted her to borrow money from Ethan's account. Once, while dropping off groceries, I spotted an unpaid medical bill on their kitchen counter with an urgent final notice stamp. Yet when Alan and I discreetly offered help, Clara became defensive. We're fine. Just fine, she insisted, laughing it off. Ethan takes good care of me. But the signs of financial distress still slipped through the cracks in her entitled facade. My suspicion solidified into an uncomfortable certainty. Something secretive was festering in my daughter-in-law's pampered life, and I had to find out what. Do you think Clara would accept money from us? I asked Alan one evening as we tidied up after dinner. He paused, wiping the table to give me a wary look. What brought this on? I twisted the dish rag tightly in my hands. I know Ethan makes good money, but they never seem to have enough. The medical bills, her shopping, something doesn't add up. I thought maybe we could help take some pressure off. Alan shook his head. We can't go throwing money at their problems, Mir. Clara won't change. She'll just keep asking for more. I knew he was right. I finished the dishes in defeated silence. Later in bed, I picked up my tablet, scrolling mindlessly through photos of Aiden, my sweet grandson somehow born to that selfish woman. College was just around the corner for him. We had already drained part of our retirement savings to cover the tuition Clara and Ethan couldn't afford. I couldn't bear seeing him stranded due to his mother's issues. As I gazed at a photo of Aiden in his high school graduation cap and gown, an idea struck me. Clara seemed obsessed with status and prestige. That desire had driven which college she pushed Aiden to attend. What if we could use that to our advantage, offer them more money, but ensure it actually went to Aiden's future this time? The next time Clara extended her hand asking for help, I made the proposal over lunch. As expected, her painted lips curved into an eager smile. "Oh, we couldn't possibly accept, Meredith," she declined with fake humility. "That's too generous." I kept my tone casual. "Nonsense. He's our only grandson. We want to invest in his future, and Columbia has so many opportunities. We don't mind dipping into our savings if it's for Aiden." Right on cue, Clara's manicured hand shot out to clutch my arm. "Well, in that case, if you insist." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Who knows if Ethan's job will even last in this economy? It would be wise to set up a nest egg for our boy." My stomach turned at the false sincerity oozing from her. Still I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Maybe a college fund? For Aiden's direct use when he's on campus?" "Please take the bait," I thought. Clara laughed loudly. "Oh gosh, no, we'd invest it into one of Ethan's portfolios for the best return. Can't have money just sitting around. But I promise it would benefit Aiden in the end." She leaned in with a wink. "It can be our little secret from Ethan. You know how hard it is for dads to let their babies grow up." Gotcha. My hands clenched under the table. Anything for her selfish gain, even secrecy from my own son. At that moment, my decision solidified. Clara would pay a price for this endless greed and manipulation. I only prayed her schemes hadn't yet sunk Aiden's future. Over the next months, I withdrew the last of our carefully built savings, transferring it in small chunks into the separate account Clara discreetly set up. With each payment, I made sure to remind her, "This is Aiden's college money, every cent." Clara would respond with a conspiratorial grin. Of course. Consider it his rainy day fund on campus." Yet the strain never left her eyes. She continued borrowing cash from Ethan, juggling bills and debts. Once I noticed a bookie's collection notice tucked into her mailbox. So exactly where was all our money going? The black hole of Clara's reckless spending didn't seem to have a bottom, and I intended to expose it wide open, for Aiden's sake. My husband and I now spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, our lifelong security gone. But it would be worth it. I would make sure of that. We had sacrificed too much already for our family. It was time Clara did the same. I awoke early on Aiden's 18th birthday, sadness and anger already souring my stomach. Ever since we drained our savings for his cryptic college fund, Clara had grown distant. My weekly calls to check on Aiden now went straight to voicemail. Any visit requests were met with an automated, "We're so busy right now" text. But there was no way she could blacklist us from Aiden's milestone birthday. I dressed in my best black slacks and cream blouse while Alan dug out an old sport coat. "Hard to believe our grandson's all grown up," he murmured. We smiled softly at each other, clinging to nostalgic memories, the only way we seemed able to hold on to Aiden lately. My breath caught as we pulled up outside their sleek modern home, the long driveway crowded with luxury cars. Of course, Clara was throwing one of her over-the-top bashes. At least 20 strangers milled about sipping cocktails on the broad-back patio. No sign of Aiden yet. I steadied my nerves as we approached Clara, welcoming her glittering guests. Sharp as always in a curve-hugging red cocktail dress, she raised her sculpted brows at us, her eyes flashing. "Meredith, Alan, you're early." Was that annoyance in her syrupy voice? Before I could respond, she called out loudly, "The waitstaff is still setting up inside, but don't worry, I'll have them take your things." On cue, a young waiter hurried over. Clara air-kissed my cheeks, whispering, "We'll chat later, okay?" Then she vanished into the sparkling crowd. My face burned as the waiter led us awkwardly through the lavish, unfamiliar house. These people sipping bubbly were not our peers. They're Clara's friends, other society wives, executives, bankers, people who wouldn't glance twice at a retired teacher and a library clerk. My fists clenched, nails biting into my palms. We found Aiden out back at the patio bar, downing a shot with his school friends. His handsome face lit up when he saw us. "Grandma! Gramps!" He rushed over, sweeping me into a big hug. I clung to his sturdy shoulders, overwhelmed with bittersweet joy. My boy, my sweet boy. "Happy birthday, kiddo," Alan said gruffly, clapping Aiden's back. His voice had gone hoarse. "Thanks for coming, guys," Aiden said. "Mom's kinda going overboard as always. But stick around, okay? You gotta see my awesome presents." He grinned excitedly, then raced off to greet more arrivals. We settled awkwardly on patio chairs, watching the young partygoers laugh and shout around us. The DJ turned the music deafening. An hour dragged by. No sign of Clara or Aiden. My head throbbed from the pulsating songs about fast cars and money and sex, each lyric like a paper cut. Finally, Clara reappeared, a glittering vision in red. "Cake time," she announced in a shrill, girlish voice. My gut told me she'd had a few drinks already, even though it was barely sunset. The guests whooped, clustering around an elaborate 5-tier cake glowing with sparklers. Clara spotted us hanging back and swayed over with a sly smile. "Well, if it isn't my favorite in-laws scurrying out of their middle-class bubble. Have you ever seen a birthday cake like this?" She didn't wait for a response, calling for Aiden to make a wish. I watched my grandson close his eyes dutifully before blowing out the fiery candles. My throat tightened. Not long ago, birthdays were an intimate family affair around our wooden kitchen table. His favorite dinners, scratch cake from Grandpa, thoughtful gifts picked out with care, not price tags. Now we were alien spectators from Clara's realm of excess. After cake, Clara air-kissed Aiden's cheek. "Present time, baby. Let's see all these goodies from Mama." The DJ killed the music so she could hand Aiden boxes of sleek electronics, gaming gear, expensive clothing. The stack just kept growing. Finally, Clara announced breathlessly, "Ready for the big finale, birthday boy?" She paused, smirking right at me. "Hit it, DJ!" The pounding music returned as a shiny black BMW coupe rolled up the driveway, a giant red bow on top. The crowd roared their approval. I stared numbly as Aiden hugged his mother, stumbling over effusive thanks. Over Clara's shoulder, her smug gaze met mine. In her glittering, golden eyes, I read the challenge loud and clear. Just try competing with this. The BMW's engine roared as Aiden's friends shouted their admiration. I watched my grandson grin from ear to ear, drunk on luxury and privilege, with no idea the cost. My legs shook as I rose from the patio chair. "Leaving already?" Clara appeared at my side, all faux concern. I breathed deeply, clutching my sweater around myself. "We'll get out of your way now. Clearly you have quite the party fund." I kept my voice even. Alan took my hand supportively. For a second, Clara's smile slipped. "At least your gift stack isn't too shabby this year," she pushed with an arched brow. "Hope you saved some retirement money for the Rolex, bro. Aiden will want next year, though." With a brassy laugh, she vanished into her circle of glittering guests. We left in defeated silence. As Alan drove us away, I stared fixedly out the window, palms clammy in my lap. Hot tears pushed at the backs of my eyes, but I refused them escape. How long would Clara keep diminishing us? Until we had nothing left, not money, dignity, or family. Back home, I went immediately to my laptop, fingers trembling over the keyboard. Please still be there. Drawing a stealing breath, I logged into the hidden account Clara had my drain livelihood into these long months. Blood roared in my ears as the balance loaded on screen. The world tilted around me. $200,000, our entire life savings meant for Aiden's college, gone without a trace. And Clara's money pit kept demanding more. My voice came out a cracked whisper, "No more." At that moment, something solid and unmoving rooted deep inside me. No more bowing and scraping so Clara could swan around flashing her designer labels. No more tight smiles while our grandson became a stranger obsessed with status. This ended now, even if I had to tear apart my own family roots in the process. Clara had committed the ultimate betrayal. Alan held me as I wept furious, helpless tears into the late hours of night. But when the sun rose, my resolve remained, cold and steady as steel. Clara had treated me as weak too long. Now she would witness my strength firsthand. I spent the next week gathering every ounce of evidence documenting Clara's financial deceit. Printouts of bank statements showing money transfers she denied receiving, copies of ignored medical bills and debts, records of sold possessions she claimed were broken, photos revealing her in luxury resorts after borrowing cash for groceries. I moved with quiet, methodical calm while fury raged inside me. My lifelong passivity had allowed this rotten infection to fester. No more. The time had come for our grandson to see his mother clearly for the manipulative, selfish liar she was, whatever it cost. Soon after, the phone rang showing Ethan's number. My pulse spiked, but I kept my tone casual as I answered. "Ethan, how nice of you to call. Hey, Mom." His serious voice set me instantly on edge. "Have you talked to Clara lately?" I sank onto the sofa, files of evidence surrounding me. "We chatted a few weeks ago. Why do you ask?" "Please tell me you've wised up to her." Ethan paused before responding. "I'm worried about Aiden's college money. Clara got me to invest almost everything in this cryptocurrency startup, said she had a good feeling about it, but the CEO just got indicted for fraud. The assets are all frozen now. I think it might all be gone." His breath came ragged. "Our boy's future, everything we saved?" "This everything you and your father saved, you mean?" Red-hot rage flooded my veins, almost choking me, but I managed to keep my tone flat. "Oh, Ethan, that's terrible." In the heavy silence, I swore I heard the last tie between me and my greedy daughter-in-law snap clean apart. She had flown too close to the sun on wings of her lies. Now it was time for her long, crushing plummet back to reality, with my family in tow. "Come to dinner in 2 nights, I told Ethan evenly. "Bring Aiden. We have a lot to discuss." I set 2 extra plates around the dinner table, my pulse fluttering with anticipation. After years of Clara slowly whittling away our dignity, tonight the axe would fall on her web of lies at last. Right on time, the front door flew open. "Grandma! Gramps!" Aiden came loping in, grinning from ear to ear. I squeezed his broad shoulders, drinking in that familiar smile I feared Clara stealing away for good. Ethan followed behind, his face lined and weary. My son, my first baby, now a father himself, needing my protection once again from his scheming wife's selfish ploys. I ushered them into the small, cozy dining room. Clara always mocked my homey decor, but I now felt grateful for the intimacy. No glittering strangers to bear witness tonight, just truth unveiled between family. "Sorry Clara couldn't join us," Ethan said tersely as we dished up steaming bowls of beef stew. "She had some last-minute appointment." Likely concocting another excuse for the missing college fund, I thought bitterly. But I held my tongue. Tonight, Clara's own actions would speak for her. We made stilted small talk through dinner about Aiden's college plans, carefully dancing around the massive financial elephant in the room. As we finished dessert, Ethan finally broke. "Okay, sorry. I know this is awkward, but we need to talk, Mom." He leaned forward, elbows braced on the tablecloth I had stitched myself ages ago. "Aiden's tuition money that Clara made me invest, it's gone. All of it. I don't understand where it... Gone?" My sharp tone sliced him short. I rose slowly from my chair, nodding at Alan. As one, we turned our eyes on Aiden, his dear face so innocent and oblivious. No more. Without a word, I retrieved the heavy box of Clara's financial records from our bedroom, returning to lift the lid. Reams of secrets and deceit. I inhaled slowly, meeting my grandson's curious gaze. "Aiden, your college money didn't just vanish. The truth is, your mother took it. She lied to you and your father. Lied to Alan and I too." My voice rang clear as a bell in the heavy silence. Ethan's eyes blew wide in shock. But Aiden just frowned, glancing between all our taut faces. "Mom took it? What do you mean?" In response, I simply started laying out the evidence piece by piece. Bank statements recording money transferred, then quickly spent, not on groceries or clothes, but designer purses, exotic getaways, scratch-off lottery tickets, default and collections notices on thousands in medical debt, records detailing possessions of ours she had sold behind our backs, and most damning, the emptied college fund she sworn was safely invested. With each incriminating paper, Ethan's face grew paler, while Aiden shifted with visible discomfort. Yet I maintained merciless eye contact with my grandson. He needed to see exactly who his mother was. a manipulator who would rob even her own son's future just to fuel her endless selfish greed. Why? Aiden finally rasped into the ringing silence. How could Mom do this? His broad shoulders trembled as he turned to his father. Dad? Ethan just gazed back, hollow-eyed with shock. So I answered gently, because she felt entitled to maintain a certain image and lifestyle, no matter who suffered. Because your father and I kept letting her cross lines without consequence. I reached out to clasp Aiden's shaking hand, and she counted on you never realizing how she took advantage of this family's trust and love. At that moment, Aiden lifted his head. Our eyes met, his shimmering with angry, unshed tears. But behind the fury and pain, I now glimpsed clarity. He finally recognized Clara for the shallow, selfish liar she was. The woman who would gamble away her own child's future just to keep up the illusion of extravagant wealth a little longer. In redeeming my grandson's truth, I had also won back his trust, and that victory was sweeter than any revenge I could ever extract on Clara. The damning evidence lay strewn across the table between us. Aiden stared down at his mother's web of deceit, shoulders hunched in disbelief. My strong grandson reduced before my eyes to a wounded little boy once again. I squeezed his arm gently. I know this is a shock, but try to remember the mother you knew before all this. I waved my hand over the records of Clara's obsessive greed. Underneath everything, that heart still beats inside her. Ethan scraped a trembling hand down his unshaven face. I just don't understand. Why hide so much debt and lies behind my back? We're married, for God's sake. As if summoned, the front door suddenly banged open. Clara's shrill voice preceded her wafting cloud of Chanel No. 5. Absolute disaster. He promised everything would be ready. Her made-up face appeared as she clicked into the dining room, stopping short. Oh, you all look cozy. Aiden's head jerked up, eyes red-rimmed but narrowing. Clara glanced between our taut expressions, her sharp gaze hesitating on the incriminating documents displayed on her son's college fund. The box of Pandora now thrown open, its secrets laid bare across her meticulous world of illusion. For one breathless moment, I thought I glimpsed a shadow of remorse or fear crack her polished veneer. But then Clara drew herself tall, armor of entitlement and arrogance clicking back into place. Well, this looks intense for a weeknight dinner party, she laughed lightly. What exactly did I interrupt? One sculpted brow arched as her shrewd eyes dared us to speak the truth, dared us expose her right to Aiden's face. Beside me, Alan cleared his throat gruffly. Your little financial circus act, it's over, Clara. We know everything. Dad, no? Ethan half rose from his chair, hands raised in pleading reconciliation. But Aiden stood abruptly, chair skidding back. His young face had set like stone. For a moment, he just gazed at his mother until Clara shifted on her designer heels. Okay, seriously, what is going on? She demanded with a tinkling, nervous laugh. When no one answered, her sharp eyes narrowed, honing in on me. Have you been telling stories again, Meredith? I rose slowly. No stories this time, just facts. I gestured calmly to the evidence arrayed across my grandmother's tablecloth like a prosecutor. Bank statements, default notices, sold possessions, an emptied college fund. Shall I go on? Clara paled under her perfect makeup. She stood motionless except for one manicured finger compulsively twirling her diamond necklace. The incriminating paper crinkled loudly as Aiden snatched up a default notice, his young voice cracking. Is it true? You spent all my tuition money just so you could buy fancy purses and clothes? Aiden, sweetheart. Clara glided toward him, palms raised beseechingly. Let's talk about this later, just us. Your grandmother clearly has some wild idea. Don't. Aiden recoiled from her outstretched hands, face mottled red in outrage. Grandma showed me bank records. You lied for years and stole from my college fund. His accusatory words rang out like gunshots in the heavy air. Tell me the truth, Mom. For once, just stop lying. Clara froze, manicured fingers suspended inches from her son's arm. Her mouth opened soundlessly as she slowly scanned our circle of faces. Ethan's downcast in shame, mine set like stone, Alan's etched with weary disappointment. No allies left for her games and manipulations. Finally, Clara turned back to Aiden. For a long, taut moment, their identical hazel eyes clashed, one pair seeking truth, the other guarding secrets. When Clara spoke at last, her usual breezy melodic tones had sharpened to a fine, brittle edge. I did it for us, Aiden. For our family. Your father and I only want what's best. By spending money meant for my college? Aiden shot back. How does that help me, Mom? Clara flinched as though slapped. In the ringing silence, Ethan slowly stood and crossed the room to gently draw Aiden against his side. Father and son united as they gazed at this superficial, selfish woman who had manipulated their family nearly to ruin. The axe had fallen at last. Now we would see just what, if anything, remained standing in the wreckage Clara herself caused. In the ringing silence, Clara scanned our hard faces, searching for a shred of empathy. Finding none, she attempted a weak laugh. Clearly, there's been some misunderstanding here. When no one reacted, she drew herself straighter. The tuition financing just didn't work out as I planned, but I only wanted the best for Aiden. I stepped forward, blood pounding in my ears. The best? You gambled away his future on selfish whims without a second thought. Clara rounded on me, manicured finger raised like a weapon. So I'm the villain just for trying to give my son the lifestyle he deserves? I saw a chance to set us up for life, and I took it. With money you swore was earmarked for college, Alan cut in raggedly. Our grandson's education, his whole future. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Clara waved a dismissive hand. Ethan makes good money, we would have figured something out. Aiden pulled away from his father's comforting grip. No, Mom, it's not just the tuition. You've been lying for years. His young face radiated fiery disappointment. Whenever Grandma and Gramps gave me gifts, you sold them behind my back. Birthday money, my computer. Ethan's head jerked toward his wife. Wait, Clara did what? Is that true? Clara glanced wildly between her husband and son, cornered at last by her own web of deceit. Aiden misunderstood. I was just trying to provide the lifestyle he deserves. I almost admired her stubborn arrogance, still convinced her selfish decisions had been justified and could simply be waved away. She wasn't even ashamed of stealing from her own child. It would have been pathetic if her actions hadn't destroyed so many innocent lives, including Aiden's. As we left Clara and Ethan arguing bitterly in the entry hall, I drew Aiden into a fierce hug. I'm taking you home with us tonight, I declared firmly. We'll get things settled, come up with a plan. Over my shoulder, I glimpsed Clara pacing as she shouted shrilly into her phone, likely calling wealthy friends to bemoan her awful in-laws who refused to bankroll her lifestyle any longer. That night, Aiden fell into restless sleep on our couch, emotions spent. My husband and I lay awake, clutching each other in the pre-dawn darkness, both yearning for the peace and happiness torn apart by one woman's obsession with material wealth. Over the following weeks, we managed to recover a portion of Aiden's college savings from the bankrupt investment scheme. Between those rescued funds, scholarships, and a reasonable loan, Columbia remained blessedly within reach. Away from his mother's poisonous presence, Aiden began smiling more often, embracing simple pleasures again rather than demand privileges and status. Ethan initiated divorce proceedings soon after, finally accepting that Clara would never change her selfish ways, not even for their son. She received the divorce petition while vacationing in St. Bart's with her socialite girlfriends, likely on Ethan's dime once again. As summer waned into autumn, stories trickled back to me of Clara's public disgrace. With her supply of easy money cut off, she now struggled keeping up appearances among her judging wealthy circles. I took some small satisfaction knowing she now reaped the consequences after so callously gambling away our family's financial and emotional well-being for her own gain. The golden leaves had begun to fall when I drove Aiden to the airport, his trunk packed for move-in weekend at Columbia. My eyes brimmed as I held his handsome face between my hands. I'm so proud of you, I whispered fiercely, and I know one day you'll pay this opportunity forward. He hugged me tight, his chest swelling with a deep breath. I will, Grandma. Thank you for everything. I watched my grandson walk confidently toward his future until he disappeared. Turning away, I raised my face to the brisk autumn breeze. Our family still bore scars from Clara's obsessive greed, but the healing had also begun at last. My breath caught in my throat as I opened the door. There stood my ex-husband Ellis, as infuriatingly handsome as ever, and next to him his imposingly stern mother Lorraine. What the hell are you doing here? I demanded, blocking their entry. Ellis flashed his signature dazzling smile. Aren't you going to invite us in, Bryn? I crossed my arms. Absolutely not. How did you even know where I lived? Lorraine huffed indignantly. We asked your sister, though I can't fathom why she'd tell us after how dreadful you treated our Ellis. My jaw dropped in disbelief. The audacity! I straightened my back and met Lorraine's glare. You have 10 seconds to explain yourselves before I call security. Bryn, dear, no need for threats, Ellis interjected gently. We merely want to discuss our living arrangements now that the unnecessary hostility from our split has faded. Living arrangements? Is he serious? He stood there perfectly poised in his designer suit, as if this were a business deal. I almost laughed at the sheer lunacy. Ellis, if you think for 1 second that I'd ever allow you back into my life— We understand you're still emotional, Lorraine interrupted, which is why Ellis and I have decided I will move in as well temporarily to ease the transition. Transition? Now I knew they'd lost their minds. I stepped forward, backing them towards the elevator. Let me make this crystal clear. There is nothing to transition back to. We are divorced. Ellis's smile faded, his voice taking on a hint of steel. Don't be rash, Bryn. You may regret it. A warning? From him? My temper flared. The only thing I regret is wasting years married to you. Now get out before I call security and the police. I jabbed angrily at the elevator button. The doors slid open and I motioned brusquely for them to leave. Ellis hesitated, then stepped in, Lorraine close behind. As the doors began closing, Ellis called out, Remember, Bryn, you forced my hand. I caught my breath, pulse racing. Forced his hand? The veiled threat hung in the air. I had no doubt Ellis was ruthless enough to follow through if I didn't act first. I strode rapidly back into my condo, locking the door. I wouldn't put it past them to try to re-enter while I was distracted. I poured myself a shaking glass of wine, equal parts furious and unnerved. So this was Ellis's endgame. He likely assumed the divorce left me broken, expecting me to cave to his demands. He always did underestimate me. I downed the wine in one long swallow. Well, not this time. If it was a war Ellis wanted, then it was war he would get, and I refused to lose. I downed my second glass of wine, still reeling from the morning's confrontation. Ellis's parting words haunted me. Forced his hand? What exactly was he planning? My phone buzzed. It was a text from Lorraine. We need to discuss this further. Expect us at 7 p.m. The hell you will, I shouted at the phone. I fired off a reply. Do not come here or I will call the police. This is harassment. Her response was swift. Don't be dramatic. We just want to talk. You owe it to Ellis after everything you put him through. I threw the phone down in disgust. Everything I put him through? The years of subtle neglect, the selfishness, the cavalier infidelity, that was all on him, and his viper of a mother encouraging it every step of the way. No, this little visit was the last straw. I wouldn't sit back and let them bulldoze over me anymore. If Ellis wanted war, I would bring it right to his doorstep. I began gathering every sordid detail I could on Ellis. I called old friends, colleagues, anyone who I thought might have dirt on him, and dirt I got. Ellis's law partners hinted at shady financial dealings. Old flames alluded to affairs. I even learned of recent harassment allegations from his young, attractive assistant, Jenna. My anger burned hotter with each new discovery. Not only was Ellis a cheating snake, but a ruthless, corrupt one at that. By 5 p.m., I had compiled a stockpile of incriminating evidence. My phone buzzed again. My mouth twisted in disgust seeing it was another message from Lorraine. We'll be there at 7 whether you like it or not. I have already made up the guest room for Ellis. My son deserves to be comfortable. Comfortable? I would make sure he and his despicable mother were anything but. At 6:55 p.m. sharp, I headed down to the lobby, a satisfied smile on my face. Right on cue, the elevator doors slid open. Lorraine strode out first, her pinched face set in a haughty sneer. Ellis slunk behind, his eyes widening when he saw me waiting for them. Before either could speak, I held up a hand. I have had quite enough of this little charade. If you try and harass me again, I'll make sure you regret it. I locked eyes with Ellis. You have no idea what I'm capable of. His cocky grin faltered. I pressed my advantage and stepped forward, glaring menacingly. I promise you, keep this up, and I'll bring your entire world crashing down. My voice shook with rage. Without waiting for a reply, I turned on my heels and left them gaping speechlessly. I had declared my war in no uncertain terms. I almost pitied Ellis. He had poked a sleeping dragon, and my fury was just beginning to wake. I arrived at my lawyer's office, files in hand, ready to launch the opening salvos of my war against Ellis. His threat still rang in my ears, fueling my determination. If he thought I would just stand by, he was dead wrong. "Bryn, always a pleasure," greeted Jacob, my seasoned attorney. We exchanged quick pleasantries before I eagerly presented my findings. I wanted to wipe that smug grin off Ellis's face permanently. "This is quite an impressive dossier," Jacob remarked, pages spread across his desk. "Extensive evidence of financial malfeasance, sexual harassment allegations." He peered up, eyebrow raised. "Do you intend to pursue legal action?" "Absolutely. I want to hit Ellis where it hurts, his money and his beloved career." My voice dripped with contempt. "I'll bleed him dry if I have to." Jacob clasped his hands, eyeing me seriously. An aggressive approach, but not unwarranted given the circumstances. He detailed a crushing lawsuit targeting Ellis's assets and law license. My pulse quickened as he described levying accusation after accusation, toppling the empire Ellis had built on lies. I left Jacob's office charged with predatory purpose. The battlefield was set, and I would emerge victorious, no matter the cost. Ellis had awoken the beast inside me, and I would have my revenge. That evening I received a series of desperate texts from Ellis. "We need to talk. Lorraine is frantic. She invested her life savings in my latest development project, and now the funding has collapsed. We're facing financial ruin if I can't access additional capital right away. Please, I'm begging you." I stared coldly at his groveling messages. Ruin? He didn't know the meaning of the word. But he would soon enough. "Bryn, please, Lorraine refuses to speak to me. You know how she gets. I swear I'll pay you back once this deal gets back on track." Sneering, I began typing a response when my phone suddenly rang. It was Ellis, likely calling to pathetically plead his case further. "What?" I answered sharply. "Bryn, thank God," Ellis's voice wavered desperately. "I know things ended badly between us, but you must help me." Must help him? I almost laughed at his audacity. In the background, I could hear Lorraine's shrill voice. "If you can't fix this, Ellis, you're no son of mine." I'd heard enough. "Ellis, our relationship died the second you betrayed our marriage vows the first time. I want nothing more to do with you or that harpy you call a mother." The line went silent except for Lorraine's strangled gasps. "Good, let them drown in panic." "Please, Bryn," Ellis implored weakly. "I'll tell you exactly what you can do, Ellis," I interrupted. "You can sign these divorce papers and terminate all contact. Maybe then I'll consider not ruining what's left of your career." Checkmate. The battle lines were drawn and my artillery was locked on target, now to fire at will. The silence on the line felt endless as I awaited Ellis's response. Finally, in a broken whisper, I heard him utter, "As you wish, I will sign the papers." His defeated words were sweet satisfaction. I promptly received the signed divorce decree, granting me a clean break along with a substantial settlement befitting my suffering. As an added bonus, Ellis included a sworn affidavit confessing to multiple infidelities. My lips curled maliciously reading his written admission of guilt. It would come in useful later to annihilate any remaining sympathy for him. I decided to also pursue action against his law license. Just because I had won my freedom didn't mean Ellis deserved to walk away unscathed. His beloved career would be the next casualty in my war against him. Over the following weeks, Jacob and I meticulously prepared complaint letters to the State Ethics Committee documenting Ellis's confessed adultery and chronicling accounts of his shady financial dealings. "This will undoubtedly trigger an official investigation based on the severity of accusations," Jacob commented as we finalized the exhaustive records. "It won't be pleasant for him. These committees rarely show mercy, especially with the hard evidence we're providing." Good, I thought, coldly. Let him be raked over the coals. He didn't deserve mercy or even basic compassion after what he did to me. Soon after submitting the complaints, I received satisfying updates of their swift and devastating impact. Ellis was placed under immediate review at his firm and barred from taking on new clients amidst the swirling accusations. Lorraine also kept involuntarily involving herself, as I knew she would. She left me endless raging voicemails when the ethics investigation was announced, blaming me for trying to destroy Ellis over nothing. Destroy him? Oh, I was just getting started. Her shrill accusations only strengthened my resolve. When Lorraine finally had the nerve to show up pounding at my door, I quickly put her in her place. "This is all your fault, you deceitful bitch," she screamed when I opened the door. Before she could spit anything else, I stepped forward and struck her sharply across the face. She staggered backwards in shock, eyes filling with tears. "Get the hell out, and if you ever come here again, the next slap will draw blood." I spat vehemently, slamming the door on her stunned face. Immediately, I filed for restraining orders against the both of them. I wanted the protection of the law to cement my separation from their toxicity. In the following weeks, every update Jacob sent regarding Ellis's deteriorating reputation and mounting legal troubles filled me with fierce satisfaction. With each judgment against him, with each damning headline, I could practically hear the foundations of his world cracking and crumbling. Good riddance. He was finally getting what he deserved. As I stood on my balcony overlooking the dazzling cityscape, I raised my wine glass in celebration. The view now perfectly symbolized my hard-won victory, rising high above the ruins of Ellis and Lorraine, exactly where I belonged. The sharp clack of high heels in my marble foyer pulled my eyes from the jaw-dropping view. I turned with a scowl, assuming it was Lorraine again attempting to barge in despite strict security protocol. But my glare transformed instantly to shock when instead I saw Ellis's young assistant Jenna striding towards me, fiery determination in her eyes. My surprise quickly shifted to anger. "How the hell did you get in here?" I demanded. She waved a keycard dismissively. "I have my methods, but that's not important." "Breaking into my home sure seems pretty damn important," I retorted. Ignoring me, Jenna declared, "I'm here to discuss Ellis." That got my attention. I crossed my arms skeptically. She took a breath. "You should know, Ellis and I are seeing each other. Have been for a while, actually." Seeing each other? Why wasn't I surprised? Ellis always did have a penchant for screwing young subordinates. First his pathetic associate at his old firm and now his new assistant. Despicable but almost impressive in the sheer audacity. I raised an eyebrow. So the harassment claims against him were what? Foreplay? Jenna flushed angrily. "No, I really was upset with him at first. The way he pursued me was so aggressive and manipulative." Her voice trailed off. Interesting. I wondered what lies Ellis had fed her to get into her pants. Jenna finally met my gaze. "But over time he made me feel so special, like I was the only one who really knew the real him, you know?" I stared at her blankly. Oh, I knew the real Ellis, all right, a selfish, sneaky scumbag. But I bit my tongue, curious where Jenna was going with this sob story. Haltingly, she continued. "The point is, I think I love him, and I want to help fix this situation with you and his mother." Fix this? I almost burst out laughing. There was no fix for what Ellis had done, but Jenna's hopeful eyes stopped my bitter response. "Ellis says if you two could just talk," she trailed off hopefully. Now I did laugh harshly. "Jenna, listen closely. There is nothing on earth that could convince me to willingly speak to Ellis again." I sighed, seeing her face fall. "I know you think you see something special in Ellis, but take it from his ex-wife. That man doesn't have a sincere bone in his body." Jenna's lip quivered. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Clearly Ellis had spun an expert web of lies and empty promises, just as he had with me years ago. Straightening sharply, I opened the door and motioned for her to leave. "Go find someone who treats you with genuine care, Jenna. Ellis isn't capable of that." Her eyes watering, Jenna hurried out without another word. I firmly shut the door behind her. Sighing deeply, I leaned against it for support. Oh yes, Ellis certainly had a type, young, naive, and vulnerable. Well, his new plaything was about to get a brutal life lesson about the true ugliness lying underneath Ellis's polished veneer, a lesson I knew all too well. In the weeks following Jenna's unexpected visit, I immersed myself in work, trying to forget the latest absurd drama. I had just secured a major promotion, validating years of tireless effort. I wouldn't let Ellis undermine all I had achieved. That resolve wavered when I arrived home one evening to find Lorraine lurking yet again outside my building, still somehow evading security. Her piercing voice cut through the night air before I could avoid her. "I hope you're satisfied with yourself," she seethed. "Ellis is at risk of losing everything because of your petty grudge." Petty grudge? I marched up to her menacingly as she continued her tirade against me, jabbing her bony finger in my face. I'd had enough. With one forceful shove, I knocked her back against the brick exterior. She yelped painfully. "If you harass me again, they'll be carting you out of here in a body bag," I growled through gritted teeth. "Stay the hell away from me." I stormed off, leaving Lorraine sputtering furiously. My phone soon buzzed with her incensed texts. "When Ellis finds out about this, it will just further motivate him to destroy you at any cost." Good luck with that, I thought acidly. Though the threat gave me pause, I knew Ellis was ruthless enough to make good if desperate. Over the next week, I learned things had only gotten worse for him professionally. The ethics investigation was in full swing, more sordid details emerging, including confirmation Ellis had pilfered client funds for his failed developments. Partners were fleeing his firm and creditors were hounding him relentlessly. His personal life fared no better. Jenna had moved out abruptly, presumably finally waking up to reality. Ellis was unraveling rapidly. When I arrived at my office one morning, my receptionist's uneasy expression immediately put me on edge. "What's going on, Gwen?" She wrung her hands nervously. "There's someone waiting for you, Jenna. She's extremely upset." "Jenna again? What now?" I hurried to my office to find Jenna sobbing uncontrollably, mascara streaking her inflamed face. "Jenna, what happened?" I asked warily. "It's Ellis," she choked out. "I went by his place to talk, and he was just destroying everything in a drunken rage." She buried her face in her hands as a fresh wave of hysteria overcame her. I sank down beside her and spoke evenly. "Jenna, listen, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time." I recounted my own painful history with Ellis's vindictive anger. Jenna lifted her head slowly, eyes widening with revelation. "Oh my God, Bryn, I am so sorry," she whimpered. "This whole time I thought you were just vengeful, but now I see Ellis clearly for the monster he is." I nodded gravely as she divulged new information on Ellis's violence and manipulation against her, cementing his abusive patterns. As Jenna composed herself, we agreed to coordinate with authorities on appropriate restraining actions. For her sake and mine, Ellis needed to face consequences. The law was about to get its claws in Ellis in more ways than he ever imagined, and I would not relent until he was shredded to pieces. I observed with quiet satisfaction as two uniformed officers firmly led a disheveled and belligerent Ellis down the precinct stairwell in handcuffs. His bellowing denials echoed through the cavernous atrium. Once outside, Ellis collapsed against the cruiser, appearing on the verge of hysterics. Good, I thought coldly, watching the bizarre scene through the station windows. Let him finally experience even a fraction of the torment he had so callously inflicted. I had coordinated closely with Jenna as well as Jacob to pursue immediate legal action against Ellis for assault, abuse, and violations of our restraining orders. The detailed accounts of his violence and manipulation left authorities with little recourse but to arrest him. That gratifying image was just the beginning. Over subsequent weeks, I was regular fixture at the courthouse, bearing witness to the comprehensive dismantling of Ellis's life. The ethics committee convened intense hearings, poring through reams of records I had supplied confirming not just Ellis's adulterous behavior, but willful professional misconduct. Account statements showed substantial sums Ellis had funneled from client estates into his own failed ventures. An open and shut case of embezzlement. I observed silently as Ellis took the stand, clamoring fruitlessly to defend himself. The prosecution interrogated him ruthlessly until he crumbled, admitting defeat. The slimy Ellis I had known had vanished, replaced by a shell of a man, broken and destitute. I couldn't tear my eyes away. The final nail in the coffin came days later. Formal notice of Ellis's disbarment. No more practicing law ever again. As Jacobs reviewed next steps, including potential jail time based on criminal financial charges, I saw years' worth of anguish finally lifting. I had won. Leaving the courthouse, I practically floated down the steps before a shrill cry of despair jarred me. Lorraine. In my satisfaction, I had almost forgotten about her. I watched, curious, as she desperately shoved through the crowd of reporters searching for Ellis. She finally spotted him retreating hastily towards a waiting town car. "Ellis!" Lorraine cried pitifully, chasing after him. "You can't abandon me! I gave up everything for you." Ellis yanked the car door open angrily. "You and your foolish ambitions got me into this mess. I want nothing more to do with you," he spat venomously. The car sped off, leaving Lorraine standing alone, crestfallen. My heart almost went out to her before I swiftly quashed the thought. She deserved this too for enabling Ellis at every turn. I strode straight past Lorraine's hunched form without a word. I had finally excised their poison from my life completely. Glancing back, I saw Lorraine turn slowly, her sunken eyes meeting mine one last time, filled with pain and true understanding of betrayal. I held her gaze indifferently, then shifted away. The hot sun beat down on me as I departed, but I had never felt such lightness. True justice was done. Now to live my life wholly and completely free. Sighing deeply, I sank back into my office chair, basking in the glow of a radiant sunset bathing downtown in golden hues. I glanced contentedly around the spacious corner suite, a visible testament to my professional successes since leaving Ellis's toxicity behind. I had swiftly risen through the executive ranks to spearhead major marketing campaigns that propelled our firm to record profits. Recognition followed, including well-deserved promotions and industry accolades, affirming my strong leadership vision. Gone were the days of simmering resentment and emotional turmoil that had defined my marriage to Ellis. In its place now stood confidence, self-assuredness, and clarity of purpose. I embraced my seat at the table and reveled in hard-won autonomy. The board was even grooming me for an imminent CEO role, acknowledging my instrumental role in recent triumphs. My throat tightened unexpectedly with emotion. God knows Ellis and Lorraine would have ruthlessly exploited my position and earnings for their own selfish agenda, just as ruthlessly as they had our marriage. Now there were no parasitic ties hindering my ascent. I had clawed my way to the top alone on sheer grit and refusal to be defeated. And I was just getting started. A light rap at my door pulled me from my thoughts. I waved my assistant Devon in cheerfully. His amiable competence and organization were indispensable. "Here is the market analysis you requested," he said, handing me a freshly bound presentation. "Also, your guest has arrived downstairs." I smiled broadly, heart quickening. "Excellent. Send him up, please." Moments later, I heard a firm knock. I opened the door to find Ryan standing there, looking striking as ever in a tailored suit, his warm brown eyes crinkling into a smile as he gave me quick kiss. His stable warmth was exactly what I needed after years wedded to Ellis's turbulent chaos. We reconnected by coincidence when Ryan joined the firm's legal team, finding chemistry still lingered from our college days. An easy rapport quickly blossomed into a blossoming relationship on my terms and timing. Ryan was more than willing to accommodate, showing genuine care and respect. No pressure, no suffocation, just unwavering support. I invited Ryan to sit on the plush sectional and popped a celebratory bottle of Dom Perignon I had been saving for this special milestone. I regaled him with the latest positive developments, confidence growing with each effervescent sip. Ryan listened attentively, interjecting words of encouragement and pride in my accomplishments. I realized suddenly I hadn't felt this secure in my entire adult life. Ryan wrapped his arms around me reassuringly, as if reading my thoughts. No, with him I had found an equal partnership, one grounded in trust and healthy boundaries, the very foundation Ellis had torpedoed. Gazing out at the glittering skyline abuzz with possibility, I nestled contentedly into Ryan's sturdy embrace. The sweet taste of triumph filled my mouth, more rich and satisfying than the finest champagne. I had awoken from the nightmare years ago. Now at long last I could bask fully in the dawn of blissful new beginnings. "How dare you show your face here?" I hissed as soon as I caught sight of Alex sauntering towards me across the school parking lot. My hands clenched by my sides, nails digging into my palms. Alex slid his sunglasses down his nose, his mouth curling into a satisfied smirk. "Well, if it isn't my darling ex-wife Meredith, you're looking tired." His gaze raked down my body. I refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. "What do you want, Alex?" "Can't I walk my daughter into school?" He mocked offense. Our daughter Lila peered at Alex from behind me, unimpressed. She was wise beyond her 7 years when it came to her father. "You didn't even call her on her birthday last week," I said sharply. "So let's drop the devoted dad act." Alex's smirk faded. Before he could retort, a sleek black SUV pulled up beside us. The driver's door swung open and Ethan stepped out, tall and impeccably dressed. I felt a rush of relief at the sight of my husband. "Everything okay here?" Ethan asked mildly as he moved to stand beside me. Lila immediately went to him for a hug. Alex's lip curled derisively. Oh look, your white knight has arrived with his fancy new car. Too bad money can't buy taste, or erase your seedy past. Ethan tensed, but a warning glance from me made him hold his tongue. I refused to indulge Alex's juvenile jabs about Ethan's privileged background. Not that it was any business of his. You should leave, I said coldly. Instead, Alex gestured at Ethan's SUV with its Delmont Foods logo. I see you clawed your way to the top after all. Then again, sleeping with the boss has always been your specialty, hasn't it, Meredith? Red-hot anger flooded me. How dare Alex throw cheap accusations at me when he was the one who had destroyed our marriage? But before I could spit out a furious retort, Ethan gently squeezed my shoulder. Actually, I'm not an employee. Ethan's voice was calm and steady. I was just named CEO last month when my father retired. So technically, this is now my company. Utter shock flashed across Alex's face. It gave me a rush of vicious satisfaction to realize he'd never known. Ethan came from one of the wealthiest families in the state, inheriting a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Alex had only ever seen him as another junior executive at Delmont. You, Alex's mouth opened and closed, uncharacteristically lost for words. Ethan gave a thin smile. Yes, my trust fund alone could buy and sell you a dozen times over. Not that I make a habit of flaunting my family money. He flicked a piece of lint off his impeccably tailored suit. I just wanted to make one thing very clear, Alex. You are not welcome here. This school, this town, it's my territory now. Stay away from my family, or you'll regret it. Alex paled, shrinked back. Without another word, he turned and hurried away across the parking lot. I let out a long breath as we watched his retreating figure. Well then, Ethan slipped an arm around me. I'd say that's enough drama for one morning. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. No matter what storms we weathered, as long as I had Ethan by my side, I knew I could survive anything Alex tried to throw our way. When Ethan said he wanted to grab coffee after dropping Lila off at school, I readied myself for the talk I knew was coming. Ethan took a long sip of his latte, then set it down and turned to face me. So, you and Alex, and me too for that matter, all worked at Delmont Foods when you met, and the rest is history. The very short version of history, I said softly. Well, let me tell you a quick story on my end. Ethan leaned back, holding my gaze with his steady, pale eyes. You started as an assistant about 6 months before I rolled up from California, another recent MBA grad hotshot, hungry for my first real corporate job. One day the CEO himself takes me out on the Delmont yacht as a perk. And there you were in this tiny bikini. I felt myself flush at the memory. My God, how young and foolish I'd been. Barely 26, vainly trying to land a higher-up boyfriend and climbing up the food giant that was Delmont. Honestly, Meredith, I liked you immediately. You were smart, scrappy, vivacious. Ethan shrugged, almost shyly. But I could also tell you were unavailable. A few discreet questions revealed you were dating hotshot young marketing exec Alex Karev. I winced inwardly at Alex's name. How naive I'd been back then, too, imaging us the perfect corporate power couple. If only I could travel back and warn my past self not to ignore all the red flags. Anyway, I tried to move on and focus on my own career, Ethan went on. But, funny enough, here we are 10 years later, exes with Alex and married instead to each other. Ethan raised an eyebrow, softening his words with a wry smile. I chuckled despite the maelstrom of emotions stirred up by this stroll down memory lane. Here we are indeed. Who could have predicted this is where life would take us? I reached across to squeeze his arm. Lucky me, though. Ethan covered my hand gently. I like to think we both got lucky in round 2, Mir. His voice turned somber. But now I think it's time you told me what really went down between you and Alex. I sighed, old hurts rising up from long-buried depths. Honestly, Ethan, I don't know if I have the full story even now. He changed, slowly at first, stayed out more for drinks with the guys, networked aggressively like his life depended on it. I was scrambling to build my own career too, though, so maybe I just didn't want to see the signs. I shook my head at my own willful blindness. Back then, I just wanted the success, the status, the money. I was willing to ignore too much in exchange for that glittering dream. In hindsight, he was clearly cheating on me for months before I caught him with his assistant. I swallowed hard. It was the biggest cliché punch in the gut, and I wasn't even that shocked. just numb at my own stupidity. "Oh, Meredith." Ethan's voice was gentle. "Don't blame yourself. Alex made those choices." I wanted to make it work at first. I stared into my coffee, remembering those wretched attempts to salvage things as Alex grew ever more brazen with his affair. But when I got pregnant unexpectedly with Lila, it pushed me over the edge. I filed for divorce when I was 8 months along. Ethan blew out a long breath, shaking his head. Well, now Alex popping up again makes more sense. Unfinished business simmering under the surface. I nodded wearily. In my heart, I knew this was only the beginning. Alex's ego would drive him to keep needling old wounds, trying to tear down the happier life I'd built without him. Well, I was more than ready for the fight now. Alex had no idea what he was provoking. My hands shook as I quietly closed Lila's bedroom door, her sobs still echoing in my ears. At 6 years old, she'd just learned the hard truth. Her father didn't want her anymore. I still wasn't sure what had prompted Alex to suddenly file for full custody. Leila had come home from his weekend visit utterly distraught, clutching the court notice. She'd always been an afterthought for Alex at best, so why this sudden strategic move against me now? I stepped out the front door for air, nausea and anger battling inside me. As if conjured by my despair, a sleek sports car purred up the street right then, gliding to a stop at the curb just beyond my driveway. Jenna. Of course, Alex's blonde assistant turned mistress had come to gloat. I strode up to her lowered window, fury overriding my disgust. "Well, hello there, Meredith." Jenna purred, snapping her gum. "Long time no see." Her smug gaze traveled over my worn yoga pants and faded hoodie. "Rough day? Cut the crap." I crossed my arms, refusing to let her see me ruffled. "I'm guessing you're behind this latest stunt from Alex. Does his wife know you're running around town doing his dirty work?" Jenna scowled, dropping her faux-friendly act. "Good. Maybe if you weren't such a shitty mom, Alex wouldn't have to step in for the sake of your daughter," she snapped spitefully. Red hazed my vision. Without thinking, I reached in and snatched the sunglasses off her surgically perfected nose. "Listen very closely, you plastic little homewrecker." My voice lashed like a whip as I leaned down to get in her face. "You both may have money and connections, but I have everything to lose, and that makes me dangerous." I crushed her $100 shades in my fist. "Now get the hell out of my neighborhood before you regret it." Jenna shrank away, for once stunned silent. I stepped back and let her peel off in a squeal of tires. As her taillights disappeared from sight, the red rage seeped away, leaving me drained and hollow. I trudged back inside with leaden limbs, pausing as my eyes landed on the pile of legal documents awaiting my response. Even just glancing at the logo for Alex's law firm kicked my heart rate up again. This was bad. Alex had the fancy lawyers and privilege on his side. While I could barely scrape rent together some months, he clearly aimed to bury me in legal bills, grinding me down through attrition. Exhausted and beaten down by the day's events, I collapsed onto the couch and finally let the tears fall. Hugging a throw pillow to my chest, I let myself cry in heaving sobs. For Lila's innocence shattered too young, for the years and dreams I'd wasted on Alex, for the injustice of seeing bad people continuously rewarded while the good suffered undeserved misery. A quiet knock at the door startled me. Scrubbing hastily at my face, I peeked out to see Ethan on my doorstep, his expression full of concern. "Lila's teacher mentioned there was drama with Alex today and you left upset. I just wanted to come check on you both." He shuffled his feet. "I know I'm probably overstepping, but I had to make sure you were okay." A fresh sob rose in my throat at this kindness. I stepped back in a wordless invitation. Ethan hovered uncertainly just inside. "I'm so sorry you're dealing with this crap from Alex now on top of everything else." His jaw tightened, a hard glint entering those soft blue eyes. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but sometimes karma takes too damn long with assholes like him. Despite everything, his vehemence surprised a watery chuckle from me. I sank back down onto the couch, suddenly beyond grateful not to be alone in this battle anymore. "Thank you for coming by, Ethan. I really needed a friendly face tonight." I wiped my eyes, feeling the tiniest spark of hope flickering back to life inside me. "And as for Alex, trust me, his karma is coming, one way or another." I tapped my foot impatiently against the courthouse floor, my nerves stretched thin. Any minute now, I expected to hear the click of Alex's designer shoes stalking up the hall, flanked by his army of suits. But the footsteps that approached were slower, more measured. I looked up and, to my astonishment, saw Ethan striding towards me, looking crisp and confident in a charcoal suit that had to cost more than my car. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" I stared at him, confused. Ever since becoming an unexpected shoulder for me to lean on these past few turbulent months, Ethan had been nothing short of a godsend. But I couldn't imagine why he'd turned up here today of all days. Wordlessly, Ethan held open the conference room door, gesturing for me to enter first. Bewildered, I stepped inside. My knees nearly buckled with relief at the sight of Lila laughing happily away on Izzy's lap. Alex's attorney sister had a soft spot for my daughter even amidst this legal crossfire. I rushed over, unable to resist sweeping Lila into a fierce hug. Over her shoulder, I shot Ethan a questioning look. He gave me a slow smile. "I'm your new pro bono legal counsel. Surprise." "What? How?" I sank weakly down into a chair, dizzy with shock. Ethan sat beside me. "I called in a favor from an old friend from my Harvard law days who owed me big time. Once I explained the situation with Alex trying to drown you in legal fees as retaliation, he was happy to help. Well, Iz and I decided to throw dear Alex a curveball this morning." Izzy smirked from across the table. "Nothing screws up a bully's game plan like being utterly ignored." I glanced between them, almost giddy with relief. Having Izzy on my side had been a key advantage so far, but with Ethan's high-profile connections on board too, I felt unstoppable. "Now," Ethan pulled out an intimidatingly thick folder of documents and turned to me with a smile. "Let's talk about preempting every devious maneuver your ex may try. Don't worry about the legal bills anymore, Mir. I want to help protect you and Lila any way I can." His hand covered mine, warm and steadying. My heart gave an odd flutter. I tried to ignore the tiny inner voice pointing out all Ethan's attractive qualities, now amplified tenfold in a suit. There would be time later to analyze whatever was simmering between us lately. For now, I needed to focus on the fight ahead. "All right, ladies, let's crush this." Izzy cracked her knuckles dramatically and winked at Lila. "Auntie Izzy and Godfather Ethan have a bulletproof battle plan ready for the judge, so your mean old dad doesn't stand a chance." Lila's grin filled me with fierce determination. I would move heaven and earth before I let Alex torment my daughter for his petty games. Not when we finally had a real shot at a stable, happy future now, thanks to Ethan. I knew with bone-deep certainty that I could weather any coming storms with this man by my side. My premonition proved true over the whirlwind legal proceedings that followed. Just as Izzy predicted, Alex failed to make even a ripple fighting against the strategic duo of her and Ethan combined. At last came the bittersweet final signing of divorce papers I'd evaded completing for so long. My hand trembled slightly as I scrawled my name one last time as Meredith Karev. Ethan's steadying grip on my shoulder kept me grounded. As we left the imposing courthouse doors for good, I tipped my face up to the brilliant sunlight with relief. The future lay ahead, filled with promise. I could focus on Lila now, on my career, on exploring this surprising new connection with Ethan. The past could finally rest in peace. I turned to Ethan with joyful tears sparkling in my eyes. "It's over. We're free." His answering smile outshone even the dazzling sunshine above. "No, Meredith." He squeezed my hand, his own rare public display revealing the depth of emotion behind that reserved facade. "This is only the beginning." As I hurried down the echoing corridor towards the principal's office, my heart pounded out a frantic beat. The urgent summons from Lila's school ignited all my worst fears. Had Alex overstepped his bounds and caused more trouble? I burst into the room, my stomach knotted into a tangled mess. But the sight behind the imposing oak desk left me speechless. Alex huddled on one chair, suit disheveled and sporting the beginnings of a black eye. Beside him sat Jenna, vainly trying to cover what looked suspiciously like a bite mark marring her exposed shoulder, and standing guard over them both with crossed arms and icy fury blazing in his blue eyes stood Ethan. "Good, you're finally here." Ethan's tone was clipped, a sure sign his anger still simmered below that polished executive surface. "Perhaps you can shed some light on exactly what happened at the playground today, because your ex-husband and his accomplice seem a little dazed on the details." It was only then I noticed Lila tucked against Ethan's side, looking tiny and stressed but physically unharmed. Overwhelming relief at seeing my baby girl uninjured temporarily muted my barrage of questions. I went straight to her and swept her into my arms. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I pulled back to search her face worriedly. I rushed right over as soon as they called me. Lila's lower lip wobbled. "Aunt Jenna and Daddy came when me and Zoe were playing. They started yelling that Zoe's mom was a stupid lying lawyer," she sniffled. "Zoe cried and ran away. I got mad and bit Aunt Jenna." Her voice rose defiantly on the last line. I blinked, impressed despite myself at my daughter's bold defense of her friend. "Yes, and that was very wrong." Ethan smoothed down Lila's hair gently. "We don't settle fights with our teeth, even when protecting people we care about." He shot a reproving look at Jenna, who flushed and looked away. I stood, hands anchored on my hips. "Would someone please explain what the hell is going on here?" I demanded. Behind me, Alex made a disgruntled noise, but wisely stayed silent. Ethan guided me a few steps away and spoke lowly. Apparently Zoe's mother represented Jenna's ex in a nasty divorce, like ripping him off for millions, level nasty. His mouth flattened grimly. "I assume they came here today meaning to cause trouble for her through the kids." Red-hot rage flooded my veins. The absolute nerve of Alex and his scheming girlfriend, dragging innocent children into their deranged grudges. I crossed quickly back to Lila, brushing her hair back to meet her eyes intently. "You were so brave defending your friend. I'm proud of you for standing up to bullies." Over her head, I pinned Alex and Jenna with a blistering look promising swift later retribution. Their twin glares bounced off my fury like droplets of rain. Just then the door banged open, admitting a harried woman I recognized as Zoe's mother. Her shocked gaze bounced between our tense tableau, and Lila tucked protectively under my arm. "Mrs. Quinn." Ethan swiftly intercepted her, laying on his polished CEO charm. "Let's step into the hall to discuss the incident from a legal perspective." He put a hand on her back, smoothly guiding her out. Through the window, I watched him work his magic, doubtlessly summarizing events in a light most favorable towards the girls. I focused back on my daughter, letting Ethan handle diffusing the situation his way. My priority stood cradled here in my arms. The rest could come later. "Let's get you home, baby girl." I lifted Lila's chin gently. "I think we've all had enough drama for one day." Her answering, watery smile and tight hug soothed my raging heart. As we left the tense office behind, I sent up a silent prayer of thanks for Ethan. Yet again he'd raced to our rescue like a dark knight in his sleek black car. And I'd never felt more secure knowing together we could conquer any monsters who dared threaten our peace. The tense silence stretched between us in the aftermath of my furious tirade. Ethan leaned back against the couch, jaw tight as he processed my barrage of bitter revelations. At last, the toxic flood tide of secrets from my past unleashed, I felt hollowed out physically and emotionally. Ethan dragged a hand over his face warily. "Jesus, Mir, I'm so sorry you and Lila have shouldered this toxicity alone for so long. That level of obsessive harassment." He shook his head, lines of anger bracketing his mouth. "Why the hell haven't you involved the authorities before now?" I closed my eyes against the rush of old shame. At first, I just kept hoping if I put my head down and focused on being a good mom, eventually Alex would lose interest when he didn't get a rise out of me. I exhaled shakily. But lately it feels like the floodgates opened. Like now that I'm actually happy again, he's snapped. Ethan reached over and squeezed my hand gently. "This cycle of violence stops now, Meredith. No more handling this alone. I'm calling my private security team and a lawyer first thing tomorrow. Then I want to sit down with Lila and explain gently why she won't see her father unsupervised anymore." His eyes tightened with suppressed fury. "Whatever it takes, I won't let that volatile bastard near either of you again." Overwhelmed with relief at finally setting down my exhaustive burden, I leaned into Ethan's strength literally and figuratively. Just feeling his solid chest under my cheek unleashed a fresh wave of tears, only this time, cathartic ones. I wept for the naive girl who once loved Alex unguardedly, for the battered woman who broke finally leaving him, for the protective mother hardened into vigilance against his campaign of cruelty. All different versions of myself rendered refugees by one man's destructive obsession. Ethan simply held me through the storm, hands gently rubbing my back. Having witnessed the traumatic genesis firsthand now, he no doubt understood this purge stood long overdue. At last I surfaced, scrubbing the heels of my hands roughly over my swollen eyes. "I'm so sorry for dumping all this ugliness into your lap, Ethan," I rasped hoarsely. "You deserve better than being saddled with another man's damage." His fingertips nudged my chin up insistently. "You have nothing to apologize for. I care about you, both of you, deeply. I'm not going anywhere." His earnest words unlocked something painfully vulnerable in my chest. Before reason could intervene, I leaned forward and pressed my lips desperately to his. Our first kiss held no artifice or sweet romantic pretense, just raw, exposed need meeting steadfast reassurance. Perfect understanding passed soul-deep between us in the charged silence after we finally broke apart. Ethan grazed my cheek lightly with his thumb. "We'll get through this fire, Meredith. Together." I covered his broad hand with my own, finally daring to hope again for the first time in years. With Ethan beside me, even Alex's sinister storm clouds seemed surmountable threats rather than looming doom. Bolstered by newfound courage, I hugged Lila close that night and made a silent, solemn vow over her sleeping form. No matter the costs, Alex would never torment my baby again. His twisted attacks ended now, one way or another. Mama Bear had awoken at last to protect and shelter her cub, and not even his savagery could stand against my ferocity for long. All his earlier tempests now seemed paltry preludes to the full hurricane fury I would rain down if Alex dared menace my daughter further. For Lila's sake and mine both, the reckoning had arrived, and not even hell itself held an agony sufficient for unleashing on that miserable man, should he push me too far. I stirred my morning coffee absently, still mentally spinning over the latest unthinkable stunt from Alex. Luring Lila out of school illegally to take her for ice cream without my permission counted as kidnapping in my book, never mind his pathetic arguments about just wanting father-daughter bonding time. My phone buzzed with an incoming call, jolting me from vengeful fantasies of sixing Ethan's security squad on my deranged ex. Speak of the devil, I smiled instinctively just seeing Ethan's handsome face flash on my screen. "Please tell me you have good news on the Alex front," I answered without preamble. "Even better." Ethan's smooth voice held a smile. "I come bearing gifts of gourmet cupcakes and moral support. Buzz me up?" I glanced down at my faded college sweatshirt and messy top knot. Not exactly hostess chic, but then again Ethan had seen me far more haggard lately. "You're a lifesaver," I sighed, pressing the door release. Moments later I ushered him inside, unable to resist going up on tiptoes to steal a quick kiss. Ever since that emotionally charged evening when our relationship shifted into romantic territory, I couldn't get enough of Ethan's steadying presence. He held up a box from my favorite bakery, looking unfairly gorgeous with his slightly rumpled hair and open collar exposing a tantalizing V of skin. "Couldn't have you facing the lawyer on an empty stomach," he winked. I grinned despite my endless Alex-induced headaches. God bless this man. Over lavish red velvet cupcakes, Ethan outlined the injunction paperwork barring Alex from contacting either Lila or me outside official supervised visitation. And if he violates these court orders even once, he'll not only face contempt charges, but also trigger an automatic restraining order. Ethan looked immensely satisfied delivering this news. I could have cried in relief knowing the legal avenues now protected us while the bigger investigation into Alex's shady practices unfolded. Turns out even wealthy corporate executives had limits to flouting the rules under Ethan's watchful eye. Stuffed on cream cheese frosting and justice, I relaxed back with a contented sigh. Hopefully Alex finally realizes he's not exempt from facing consequences. Here's hoping. Ethan stacked our empty plates. Unfortunately, when it comes to ruthless narcissists like your ex-husband, the hard lesson usually requires hammering home a few times. His expression turned serious. "I know you're not scared easily, Meredith, but please promise you'll let my security team handle any direct interactions if Alex approaches you or Lila again." My instinctive, stubborn independence bristled slightly at the protective decree, but the earnest love shining in Ethan's eyes wore my reluctance down. I knew his directive came from caring deeply rather than any deliberately heavy-handed male posturing. I lifted our joined hands and brushed a soft kiss over Ethan's knuckles. I promise, babe, no more stubbornly trying to tackle everything solo. His shoulders relaxed, tension easing from his frame. Our sweet moment got interrupted by Lila bounding through the door, fresh from school, full of chatter about her day. As we listened indulgently to her winding stories, I felt my heart settle into calm, steady rhythm for the first time in forever. The trials of my past with Alex seemed now muted nightmares compared to this luminous present with Ethan and Lila. I'd been running so hard towards imaginary futures before. I missed recognizing the only dreams worth chasing sat right here under this roof, filled with laughter and light. No matter what storms still brewed on the horizon, together we'd shine brightly enough to weather even Alex's bitterest gale forces. This right here already felt like home, the safe harbor I'd fought so desperately to reach through so many dark and frightening nights. At long last, we'd found our way home. The message stared back at me from my phone screen, my hands trembling. Thought you'd want to see how perfect my life turned out. Ellis proposed last night on the beach in Hawaii, baby girl due in 2 months too. I have everything I ever wanted. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Marina. The wound I thought had healed tore open again, raw and aching. You okay, Cal? My husband Adrian peered over my shoulder, his thick brows drawing together. I twisted away quickly, locking my phone. Fine, I muttered. Who was that from? You look like you've seen a ghost. His strong hands clasped my shoulders, warmth seeping through my shirt. I shook my head, avoiding his dark eyes full of concern. I didn't want to taint our happy life together by dragging in the past. Marina was my burden to bear. Just an old friend, I managed. She wanted to catch up. At 7 a.m. on a Saturday? Adrian raised one eyebrow. He knew me too well. Before he could ask more, our 4-year-old cacophony of curly hair and dimples toddled into the room, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Mama, sausage! His demands derailed us as I scooped him up, peppering his round cheeks with kisses until he squealed. Over tiny fingers sticky with syrup, I met Adrian's gaze. We'll talk tonight after Nate's in bed. He nodded, though his eyes told me he wouldn't forget. After breakfast, I bundled Nate up for the park to buy some time. The cold January air reddened his cheeks as he raced toward the swings, dinosaur flapping. My little munchkin, my light, he filled my days with joy I'd never dreamed possible. Watching Nate play, the wounds in my heart throbbed anew. I couldn't let this go. Marina had stolen so much from me already. My sense of self-worth, my dreams for the future. Years spent battling crippling anxiety and depression, thanks to her mind games. Not this time. She didn't get to swan in with her tacky ring and erase the family I had built. The happiness she mocked me too broken to ever attain. I tapped out a reply with chilled, gloved fingers. Congrats to you and Ellis. I'd love to meet your new baby girl and catch up when you're settled. Saturday brunch next month? My phone pinged seconds later. How thoughtful, Callie. Can't wait to welcome you into our gorgeous new home. I'll make sure the chef whips up plenty of food for us girls to nibble on while we chat. Come hungry. I gritted my teeth as Nate raced over, cheeks flushed, mittened hands grabbing mine to spin dizzy circles. His joyful giggles lightened my mood, even as I worried what seeing Marina might dredge up. I had to try, for my own sake. Closure waited on the other side of her torment. I just had to tough it out. Adrian? I asked later as we lay under the covers. His arms wrapped around me. Want to come with me on a reunion brunch next month? I felt his breath stir my hair as he asked, with that old friend from the message? Yeah. Her name's Marina. My voice stuck in my throat. We have a complicated history. His arms tightened around me. I'm here if you want to talk about it. Haltingly, tears slipping down my cheeks to wet the pillows, I told Adrian about the decade of friendship severed in a single day's betrayal. My first love, Ellis, running off with my best friend when I was just 19. Their wedding just a year later, everyone acting like my pain meant nothing. Adrian listened silently, thumb wiping away the steady drip of tears, his presence my safe harbor. When I finished, he pressed his lips to my hair. I'll come with you, Cal. We'll face her together. The morning of our ill-fated reunion, I woke before dawn, restless anxiety churning my otherwise empty stomach. Adrian's steady breathing was my only comfort as I slipped from bed to pace our darkened bedroom. Today I would face the friend who twisted the knife of betrayal so cruelly, walking back into a past I wanted only to forget. But forgetting let her win. This time I looked her in the eye as an equal. Adrian emerged bleary-eyed just as pale light filtered through the curtains. Strong arms enfolded me. "It'll be okay, Cal. I've got your back." His voice dispelled some shadows. I nodded into his shoulder, breathing in his woodsy scent before pulling away. "Let's get this over with." I dressed on autopilot, donning armor to guard my still fragile heart. Picking Nate up from Adrian's parents, my smile felt brittle as glass. Their warm hugs soothed like a balm before we headed out. Marina's ostentatious house loomed, windows glinting. My knees went weak seeing Ellis's shiny BMW parked in the drive, vanity plate MD Ellis gleaming. Adrian's hand found mine, steadying. The heavy mahogany door swung open. Marina posed like a magazine spread come to life in a clingy red dress, flawless makeup unable to hide the calculating glint in her eyes as they raked over me. "Callie, so glad you could make it." Her delighted trill didn't reach those cold eyes. "And you brought a guest." I stepped aside to reveal Adrian, pride swelling my heart. "This is my husband, Adrian." Marina's smile fractured for a split second. "Of course. Lovely to meet you, Adrian." She led us inside the cavernous foyer toward the sunlit breakfast nook where Ellis sat scrolling his phone. My pulse stuttered seeing him relaxed amid extravagant flower arrangements and linen-draped tables. Adrian gave my clammy hand a subtle, bracing squeeze. "Ellis, sweetie, you remember Callie?" Marina cooed, "And this is her husband, Adrian." He extended his free hand. After an awkward pause, Ellis stood to shake it, mouth twisting. "Can I offer you some refreshments?" Marina gestured smoothly, the consummate hostess. "Mimosa? Coffee?" I opened my mouth to decline when Adrian said easily, "Coffee would be great, thanks." He met my gaze as Marina wafted away, message clear. We needed to stay alert. An awkward silence swelled. I studied the ostentatious diamond on Marina's left hand, recalling my pure joy when a 19-year-old Ellis proposed to me with a modest ring of his grandmother's. Staring at Marina across the table moments later, I knew she hadn't forgotten either. Her sly smile oozed malicious delight at flaunting her enviable life. My voice came out steady. "Where is that new baby girl of yours?" Marina's smile turned saccharine. "Oh, the nanny has her. I can't be worrying about her fussing right now, can I?" she tittered. I bit my tongue as anger flared. Of course her baby was an accessory, stashed out of sight. I thought of Nate's delightful babble and kissable cheeks. My son was my whole heart, not a status symbol. "You two will have to try for one soon," Marina continued breezily. "I can recommend my fertility doctor if you need. Sometimes it just takes a little push, right?" I froze. We hadn't shared my long struggle with secondary infertility. The barb hit its mark. Adrian shifted closer, draping his arm around my shoulders. "We have an amazing son named Nate. He's 4, I managed. Adrian and I shared a private smile at the thought of our rascal's antics. Marina's gaze turned calculating, thin brows lifting. "Oh, really? You never mentioned him, Callie." Her tongue caressed my name like a taunt. "Well, isn't that nice for you both?" I bit the inside of my cheek, holding her cunning gaze. Adrian's solid presence grounded me for the agonizing small talk yet to come. The opening shots had been fired, but I wouldn't crumble this time. Game on, Marina. The rest of that awkward brunch passed in a tense haze of subtle barbs and thinly veiled boasts. Adrian's solid presence was my lifeline as we navigated the minefield Marina laid with each casually cruel comment. Finally we made our escape, Ellis's aloof dismissal barely registering through my anger and hurt. Back home, I asked my in-laws to keep Nate a bit longer, needing time to process. Adrian drew me a bath while I stared numbly out the window, lost in memories. The wound Marina ripped open refused to stop seeping anguish, no matter how I tried to stem the flow. I let the lavender-scented water soothe my frazzled nerves before joining Adrian where he waited on our bed. No words passed between us at first in the quiet sanctuary of our room. I found solace leaning against his broad chest, his fingers slowly carding through my damp hair in wordless support. When I felt grounded enough in the present moment, the words started spilling out. Seeing them today was harder than I expected, I admitted. It all came flooding back. How much they hurt me. Adrian listened intently as I plunged into memories I usually kept locked away, finding comfort in having a safe place to unpack that painful baggage. I told Adrian about my teenage years as the shy, awkward girl struggling to believe I deserved friends or admiration. Marina had seemed like a gift, beautiful and bubbly. Her confidence drew others like moths to a flame. I basked gratefully in her popularity and warmth, never dreaming it was all conditional. The first cracks appeared when I caught the eye of Ellis, a handsome track star 2 years above us. Popular Marina had dated strong-jawed football players and cocky student government types more suited to her glittering social tier before. The way she looked at me when Ellis and I shared milkshakes and held hands in the hallways should have warned me our days were numbered. But I was young and blind, drunk on nascent love. The bubbly warmth Marina showed me evaporated overnight when Ellis proposed the Valentine's Day of my senior year. At our celebratory sleepover 2 days later, I emerged from the bathroom to find them half naked and frantic in my bed. Every insecurity came crashing down at once, my sense of self-worth shredded beyond repair. They didn't just take my future or my social life. They took any ability to trust myself or others for years. I swiped angrily at the tears trailing down my cheeks. Adrian's steady heartbeat and the brush of his lips on my hair kept me tethered to now. I believed for so long something was wrong with me after they tore my world apart. Why take what I wanted most unless I didn't deserve it? My voice broke on the ugly truth that shaped so many depressive episodes and sabotaged so many relationships. Adrian shifted onto his side and gently cupped my chin. You didn't deserve what they did to you. That was on them, not you. His eyes radiated fervent conviction. You deserve the world, Callie, and I plan on spending my life reminding you. Fresh tears spilled over at the tenderness in his face. I might bear scars from that traumatic betrayal, but Adrian loved my whole self, damage and all. If seeing Marina was the test, I realized I'd already passed. I had everything today that she tried so hard to deny me out of petty jealousy. I was the lucky one after all. I expected relief after confronting my painful history, but closure remained elusive even weeks later. Adrian watched me poke listlessly at my breakfast with growing concern creasing his brow. You're still thinking about her. It wasn't a question. He knew me too well. I sighed, dropping my fork onto the half-eaten plate of eggs. I just keep replaying it all, wondering if I should have handled it differently. Could I have said something to throw her off balance for once? You stood your ground and held your head high through that ambush. I was proud just to be by your side. Adrian reached across the table to squeeze my hand. She wanted to get under your skin, so don't give her the satisfaction. My phone chimed from the counter, interrupting the tender moment. I shuffled over, expecting a text from my sister or Mom. The sender made my breath halt. Marina? I opened it hastily, nerves sparking. Hi, Callie. Enjoyed our catch-up session last month. I shuddered at her use of catch-up session like it had been two old friends nibbling cookies over tea, not a minefield of microaggressions. Thought you might want to see baby Sloane now that we're home from the hospital. Come by any time. The words blurred. I could almost hear her playful, egging me on tone through the screen. She dangled her perfect newborn like a prize pony, continuing her attempts to flaunt her picture-perfect life. My molars ground together audibly. Adrian came up behind me, wordlessly reading over my shoulder before wrapping me in his strong arms. I'm so sick of her games, Adrian, I whispered into his chest. She's eaten up with jealousy, and it's pathetic. He stroked my hair thoughtfully before pulling back to meet my eyes. You still want closure, though, right? To put this behind you once and for all? I nodded, eyes prickling with irrational tears. Then we end this on our terms. We'll go let her parade around feeling superior, then pull the rug out from under her. I think I know just the way. A sly grin spread across his face. 2 weeks later, we again stood outside Marina and Ellis's ostentatious house, this time with a secret weapon in tow. My palms turned clammy as we walked up, our 4-year-old son babbling happy nonsense between us. Nate knew nothing of the history behind this visit. He just radiated cheerful joy at a special outing with Mommy and Daddy. The door flew open, Marina striking yet another affected pose for her perceived audience. Her scarlet lips parted, eyes widening as she spotted our grinning tow-headed addition clutching my hand. Callie, you made it, and this must be. Her composure barely flickered. Our son, Nate, Adrian supplied when I faltered. Well, isn't he just precious? Her trill echoed with false delight. "Come in, come in." This time, as we settled around the table laid out with ornate tea sets and dainty finger foods, I fought to hide a smirk. Marina hadn't expected adorable evidence of my abundant happiness. Our eyes locked over the table and her gaze sharpened before her plastic smile reappeared. "Help yourself to snacks. Love," she told Nate with cloying sweetness. "I'll just fetch Miss Sloane from the nanny and be right back." As she sashayed off, I squeezed Adrian's leg under the table, my heart lighter than it had felt in years. Let the games begin. Marina returned moments later, cooing over the blanket-swaddled newborn in her arms, her usually immaculate hair frizzed slightly, betraying the imperfections beneath her polished veneer. I smiled blandly up at her. "What a little doll! You look amazing for just having a baby, Marina." "Oh, this," she laughed lightly, smoothing her figure-hugging dress. "The gym has done more for my physique than any silly fad diet. I won't be caught out with baby weight." I hid a flare of annoyance as she preened. My post-baby body had taken years to regain confidence in after Nate. Her petty comments only highlighted her jealousy. My fit, happy toddler was worth every stretch mark and squishy area that lingered, though Marina would never understand. Oblivious, Nate babbled nonsense at the bundle in Marina's arms between sticky handfuls of cake. My friend cooed over him like borrowed accessory. "Clever boy, you'll have all the girls chasing you in a few years," she trilled, loud enough to grate. I fought not to clench my jaw. "He takes after his father," I said, meeting Adrian's warm eyes. Pride swelled in my chest. Both my guys had the same soulful gazes and riotous dark curls. Marina's smile thinned. "You two do make cute offspring." As if on cue, Ellis emerged fresh from a shower, his dripping hair leaving damp marks on his collar. My stomach tightened. We hadn't seen or spoken to each other in over a decade beyond tense pleasantries 3 weeks ago. Oblivious Nate popped up, bounding over to tug Adrian's sleeve. "Daddy, come see baby." Ellis froze. Eyes narrowing, he took in our son's coloring, a perfect blend of Adrian's Cuban roots and my fair Scottish heritage. The way Nate clung adoringly to Adrian left no question of paternity, despite Ellis's clear surprise. His lip curled derisively. "Precocious little guy you've got there." Heat flooded my cheeks, but Adrian just chuckled, swinging Nate up easily onto his shoulders, their matching grins warming me to my core. My happy little family shone bright enough to eclipse any darkness. Marina hastened to diffuse the sudden tension. "He's such a darling. You must be so proud, Callie." I met her too bright gaze levelly. "Beyond proud. Adrian and I feel incredibly blessed every single day." We shared a private smile over Nate's giggles as he drummed Adrian's curly hair like a keyboard. "Daddy's hair is silly," Nate crowed. Adrian rolled his eyes in mock exasperation, grin belying his true delight in our son's antics. Marina's laughter sounded strained as she watched our easy intimacy. "Well now, Callie, no need to rub it in that you finally snagged your white picket fantasy, Irritation flared in my chest at the thinly veiled scorn. Adrian tensed, ready to unleash some protective heat, but I touched his arm lightly. I could handle her needling lies. Setting Nate down to play with his toy cars, I faced Marina squarely. "I wasn't aware sharing facts about my family counted as rubbing it in, Marina. We couldn't be happier, though I'm sorry if that bothers you." My teeth flashed in facsimile of a smile. Her nostrils flared delicately. The baby stirred in her rigid arms. "It seems motherhood has done wonders for that famous Callie modesty." I bristled as she added breezily, "Don't get me wrong, you were always such a shrinking little violet. I'm glad you finally grew some thorns." Nate's joyful babble underscored the tense silence. Adrian radiated fury beside me, but I squeezed his hand, willing patience. Just a little longer. I let the pretense fall away, meeting Marina's spite-filled gaze with calm certainty. "Maybe you just didn't know me as well as you thought back then." My smile felt more genuine than it had in years. "But I know who I am now. Finally." Marina's frosted pink lips pressed into a thin line, manicured nails digging cruel half-moons into Sloane's blanket. Before she could retort, the front door burst open. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a beast." My sister Liv breezed in, all bouncing ginger curls and freckled smiles. Her entrance allowed the tense moment to deflate. I almost laughed at the matching, dumbfounded expressions on Ellis and Marina's faces as Liv prattled on, peeling off her coat and scarf to drape on a chair. "I ran into James downtown last week." Liv continued, dropping a kiss on Nate's head as she passed by him playing on the floor. That man has aged like fine wine, I tell ya. She turned to Adrian with a wink. No offense, darling. Adrian just chuckled, slinging an arm around my shoulders. None taken. I bit my lip, watching emotions flicker across Marina's face in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, dawning unease as she processed our unexpected tag team. Two could play at her manipulation games. Marina, Ellis, this is my sister Olivia, I introduced after an awkward beat. Liv, meet my old classmates. Lovely to meet Callie's nearest and dearest, Liv enthused, shaking their limp hands before cooing at the now fussy newborn. Ooh, what a wee bairn you have here. Marina shushed Sloane absently, eyes narrowed at our cozy dynamic. I watched the wheels turn behind her calculating gaze. She thought inviting me over would let her gloat about her picture-perfect life, never imagining I now had an abundant support system beyond just Adrian. Well, this is cozy. Marina cleared her throat with affected daintiness. Anyone for more tea? Oh, I'd love a splash, Liv sighed, claiming Marina's vacated seat with enthusiasm. Oblivious to the undercurrents, she launched into a story about her salon mishaps that week, bright laughter filling the terse room. Across from me, I noticed Ellis boring holes in Adrian with his stare. My husband seemed relaxed, one arm draped casually over my chair, but I recognized the protective set of his jaw. Adrian radiated easy confidence. This was his arena after all. So, Adrian, is it? What line of work are you in? Ellis bit out abruptly. Trust a type A doctor like Ellis to lead with thinly veiled competition. Beside him, Marina perked up, clearly wondering the same thing. Adrian smiled placidly. I'm a chef and restaurateur. Own a few local spots downtown. You've probably heard of Blackbird? I hid a smirk at their dumbstruck expressions. Adrian's flagship restaurant, Blackbird, was a massive success, featured in magazines and constantly booked months in advance. Far cry from the struggling line cook I'd met years ago, though his humble drive remained unchanged. I can't say I've had the pleasure. Ellis practically choked out the admission, though I don't often dine out with my schedule. We'll have to fix that, Adrian said easily. Dinner is on me anytime, I insist. His generosity contrasted Ellis's transparent posturing beautifully. Adrian shone confident and self-assured, born of years proving naysayers wrong, while Ellis still clung to same arrogance that drove him to cruelly stomp on my young heart. How had I ever found that appealing? I settled deeper into Adrian's loose embrace with a hidden smile. Marina and Ellis wore equally sour expressions. All their scheming to humiliate me only reflected back their own inferiority complexes, while highlighting what truly mattered, my family. The dam broke over an otherwise innocuous comment. Liv, bless her oblivious heart, turned to me with a wide grin. So, Collie, think you and Adrian will give little Nate a sibling sometime soon? You know I'm dying to be Auntie Livy to a wee lassie, too. My chest tightened reflexively. We hadn't shared my secondary infertility struggles outside of close family, given the painful sensitivity. I opened my mouth, flailing for a polite deflection, but Marina spoke first. Oh, they already tried, didn't you, Callie? Her tongue caressed my name mockingly, eyes glinting. Apparently it didn't take. Fury roared in my ears. The indignity of her smirking down at me, using my private pain as ammunition, broke the final thread of patience holding me back. Adrian shifted beside me, seconds from snapping, but I squeezed his wrist lightly. This was my battle, the culmination of years of my nightmares, starring Marina's sweetly smiling cruelty. No more. Setting my tea down with precise, controlled movements, I met her glittering stare. I apologize if our happy news today threatens you, Marina. It must be uncomfortable realizing your bizarre invitations failed to showcase the perfect life you clearly crave affirmation for. I kept my voice calm and steady like my hammering heart wasn't audible. The thing is, our lives were never in competition. I don't need to put you down to lift myself up like you seem determined to do. I'm genuinely happy, though I'm sorry if the same isn't true for you. Marina reeled back as if I'd struck her, cheeks flushed beneath artfully contoured makeup. For the first time in our long rivalry, she had no facile retort prepared. The raw, unveiled hurt in her eyes penetrated through her superficial shields, offering a glimpse of the scared little girl still inside. The one who lashed out in fear of being judged or found unworthy. My anger drained away just as quickly as it arose. With sudden clarity, I realized Marina was the one still living in our traumatic past, prisoner of old insecurities blinding her. Meanwhile, I'd found peace through Adrian's love and the family we built together, the very things she tried so hard to deny me. Her efforts no longer even dented my joy or self-worth. I had finally won by refusing to keep playing her games at all. Into the loaded silence, Adrian added the coup de grace we orchestrated ahead of time for this moment. Well, this has been an experience, but I think it's best we head home. Busy day tomorrow finalizing the offer on that new restaurant space. He checked his watch theatrically. Plus, I have a meeting scheduled first thing to brief Ellis's administrators on certain concerning workplace behaviors that have come up. Ellis blanched. As a department chair at the hospital, with a reputation for coasting on prestige and family connections over work ethic, scrutiny into shady practices could be career-ending. Adrian's expression remained placid, but his eyes flashed triumphantly. Nothing brought him more satisfaction than seeing entitled bullies face real consequences. Marina looked rapidly between them in dawning dismay before turning wounded eyes my way. For a heartbeat, I saw again the quivering, rejected 17-year-old girl I'd once been. My chest ached with grief for our broken friendship, the lost potential. Then the shutters descended once more, and scowling, emulate Marina hid her wounds away, turning without another word to seek refuge behind the fortress of her meaningless perfections. Just like that, it was over. I walked away without a backwards glance, finally free. My talk with Liv 2 nights later revealed the full ripple effects from that explosive day. After screenshotting Adrian's subtly threatening texts to Ellis about reporting physician misconduct, I decided to abide by fate's final twists. Word traveled fast around those elite circles. Humiliated by Adrian's reveal and infuriated by his threats, Ellis retaliated by filing for divorce from Marina. Drunk on self-righteous indignation, he soon found himself suspended from the hospital after my worm of a sister-in-law no longer relayed an unverified complaint about scrub nurse harassment. The perfect life Marina fought so hard to flaunt splintered just like that. I almost pitied her if the depths of her cruelty over the years hadn't burned that softness out of me long ago. Learning she'd been little more than a status symbol herself proved justice enough. Now, she could enjoy Ellis's temper without my shoulder to cry on when it turned her way. Meanwhile, Adrian celebrated a banner year, opening 2 new wildly popular restaurants in L.A., while we started an exciting new chapter abroad. That dream trip to Spain we fantasized about during our broke newlywed days in that cramped apartment with peeling paint finally manifested into reality thanks to his soaring success. Nate took to expat life and Spanish lessons like a fish to water while we reveled in sharing beloved foods, vibrant murals, and flamenco music as a family. Our daughter Pilar arrived 9 blissful months after we relocated, her little face the mirror of my own baby pictures. Those joyful early weeks with 2 healthy children, thousands of miles from old ghosts, felt nothing short of an answered prayer. On Pilar's first birthday, I video called my parents back in the States, keeping one eye on our giggling baby covered in cake. Their proud faces filled the laptop screen until Nate ducked into view, clutching his new stuffed llama, chattering about his cool Spanish friends. Watching my son charm my beaming parents with exaggerated hand gestures, mimicking his teachers, I felt my heart expand almost to bursting. After they hung up, I pulled out my journal, pens scratching swiftly to capture the emotions bubbling up. How could I ever explain to little Pilar about Aunt Marina someday? My children knew nothing of frenemies or heartbreak. They jumped freely into life, trusting themselves inherently, something I struggled so hard to learn. I never wanted them to dim their shining light for anyone. Later, Adrian found me staring wistfully at the dark screen after I tucked our worn-out birthday girl into bed with her brother. Strong arms wrapped around me from behind, and I relaxed into his solid warmth. "Happy thoughts?" he murmured into my hair. I nodded, turning to frame his beloved face in my hands, eyes prickling with inexplicable tears. "Just realizing how lucky I am, how happy and free." He smiled softly, brushing his thumb across my cheek to catch one shimmering tear. "You did this, you know. You faced your demons head-on and came out stronger. I'm so proud of you, mi amor." Standing wrapped in Adrian's arms, I let his words sink into my skin, into my very bones. He was right. The dark ghosts that haunted me for so long only had power if I let them. Today I closed that door. Looking forward at the joyful life we built, I wouldn't waste another moment. The girl who let people determine her self-worth was gone. My worth shone through my children's laughter and my husband's loving gaze. Finally, I was enough just as I was. Survivor scars and all, Marina lost her grip long ago. I smiled up at Adrian through tears of hard-won peace, softly echoing his words. I did this. The reading of my parents' will should have been a solemn occasion, but Dale's cruel laughter shattered any sense of decorum. Well, well, the good daughter loses again, he sneered, basking in the shock radiating from my face. Mr. Jennings, our family lawyer, cleared his throat uncomfortably. I understand this is a difficult situation, Lorraine, but per your parents' explicit instructions, the bulk of their estate, the investment portfolio, cash assets, and beach house is to be transferred to Dale. I struggled to process the words, a cold numbness spreading through my body. But the vineyard? Surely they left me that at least? My voice cracked with desperation. Dale barked out another harsh laugh. Are you kidding? You get the ramshackle family home and their little vanity project, that run-down vineyard that's been bleeding money for years. He leaned back smugly. I'm finally getting what I deserve after being the black sheep for so long. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd sacrificed my youth, my dreams, to be the ever-devoted daughter caring for our sick parents without complaint, all while Dale drifted from city to city, gambling away any money he could get his hands on. Mr. Jennings gave me a pitying look as he slid the paperwork across the desk. I'm so sorry, Lorraine. This was their final wish, as difficult as it is. Dale stood abruptly, already counting the windfall in his mind. Don't worry, sis. I'll keep a piece of that vineyard as a reminder of your failure. His grating laugh echoed down the marbled hallway as he sauntered out. I stared at the paperwork, the printed words swimming before my eyes. One unkind decision had erased decades of my selfless acts. The cherry on top of my imploding life, Dale inheriting the fortune while I was left with crumbs and a sinking ship of a business. Gripping the documents, I found my resolve hardening. If my parents wanted to reward the black sheep, so be it. But I would not allow Dale's greed and arrogance to render my sacrifices meaningless. With every ounce of determination, I vowed to revive the vineyard and make it thrive. My throat burned with decades of swallowed pride, but I would no longer accept being diminished and stepped on. This might be a twisted legacy, but I would honor it through my own perseverance, not for my parents, not for their misplaced faith in Dale. This revival would be for me, an act of defiant redemption against those who had ground me into the dirt for far too long. As I exited Mr. Jennings' office and strode into the sunlight, I could almost taste the bittersweet triumph of success already emerging from the soil. Dale's gloating laughter would one day be drowned out by the roar of my ultimate victory. The drive back to the rundown family home was a blur. I pulled up to the dilapidated two-story house, taking in the chipped paint and overgrown weeds choking the path. This ramshackle place was now my sole inheritance, a twisted joke. Grabbing the tattered deed, I shoved open the front door, the musty scent of decay assailing my nostrils. I surveyed the living room, my gaze landing on a dusty photo of Dale and me as children, his arm casually slung over my shoulders with that infuriatingly smug grin. A red haze washed over me, and I hurled the deed across the room, the papers scattering like fallen leaves. That arrogant bastard. The bitterness poured out in a scream of anguish. Memories came flooding back, decades of thankless servitude, while Dale blew in and out of our lives like a hurricane, leaving devastation in his wake. Yet, in the end, he reaped the rewards meant for me. Screw this! I snatched up the photo, hurling it against the wall where the glass shattered spectacularly. I won't let your betrayal break me. Fists clenched, I stormed out the back door, driven by a simmering rage. I found myself standing before the neglected vineyard, a once vibrant source of joy for my parents that had withered into a decrepit graveyard of gnarled vines and parched soil. In that moment, everything became clear. This derelict land would be my path to redemption, my middle finger to Dale and the injustices inflicted upon me. I would pour every ounce of my being into resurrecting this vineyard, not just for myself, but to spite those who had tried to bury me. I grabbed a rusted trowel lying amid the weeds and began hacking away at the tangled roots, sweat beading on my brow as I lost myself in the punishing physical labor, each swing a furious revolt against my crumbling reality. The blisters were worth it. The aching muscles a welcome distraction. I would revive this vineyard through sheer force of will, and one day Dale would choke on his perceived victory as I claimed mine. Exhaustion eventually overtook me, and I collapsed beside the first cleared vines, chest heaving. But as the sun began its descent, I felt an ember of hope flicker to life in my soul. One calloused hand brushed against the withered grapes clinging to the vines, and I knew in that moment that my life's purpose would be growing from this forsaken plot of land. No longer would I accept being disrespected and disregarded. My name was Lorraine, and by God, I would make it mean something again. The days and weeks that followed blurred into a relentless grind. My life became a singular devotion, reviving the decimated vineyard that clutched at my ragged soul like a lifeline. I awoke each dawn to the ache of protesting muscles, emerging from the decrepit family home to lose myself amidst the parched vines and hardened soil. Money drained from my meager savings at an alarming rate as I purchased fertilizers, tools, and equipment to aid in my arduous toil. More than once, well-meaning neighbors stopped by, brows creased with concern. "Lorraine, honey, maybe it's time to let this hobby farm die a dignified death," Margie tutted, wringing her hands. I straightened from where I knelt, grimacing at the protest in my lower back. "It's not a hobby, Margie." My voice was a gravely rasp, dehydrated from long hours beneath the scorching sun. "This is my life now." The old widow's eyes widened at the feverish zeal burning in my gaze before she shuffled away, murmuring a prayer under her breath. I was too far gone to care about others' opinions of my obsession. This land, this vineyard, it was all I had left. Some days, I feared madness had taken root alongside the tender green shoots finally unfurling. When the relentless summer storms rolled in, I spent hours in the muddy fields, frantically shoring up vines and pumping out the flooded irrigation trenches with a ruptured sump pump. On those nights, I curled up in the dank tool shed, clothes plastered to my shivering form, massaging cramped hands and fantasizing about Dal's face when he realized I wouldn't go down without an earth-shattering fight. The deranged laughter that burst from my cracked lips those nights likely cemented the town's perception of my spiraling descent into unhinged insanity. Nature itself seemed hell-bent on annihilating my efforts, from Cabernet-devouring insects to merciless hailstorms that shredded entire trellises in minutes. Each morning after such assaults, I surveyed the damage with a hollow detachment before hurling myself at the ravaged earth to rebuild and replant, again and again. Even when funds dwindled perilously, I refused to surrender, bartering away possessions and taking demeaning jobs like scrubbing toilets to scrounge up cash to keep my makeshift operations afloat. Exhaustion became my constant companion, coupled with the obsessive drive not to let this fledgling chance at redemption wither on the vine. Some nights, I curled on the ground amid the gnarled vines, spent and aching, brooding on memories of Dale's cruelties, his mocking laughter, his sneering digs at my spinsterhood while he squandered every opportunity. Those blazing coals of hatred fueled my determination to show him, once and for all, my fortitude could no longer be disregarded and crushed underfoot. From the charred ashes of my former life, a new Ani would be forged, emboldened, hardened, unstoppable. The first delicate buds appeared like gems after that brutal winter, vivid green fractals unfurling to greet the warm spring sunshine. I cradled the tender shoots in my calloused palms, a sense of awe and renewal swelling in my chest. This gritty resurrection was far from over, but those buds represented the first tangible fruits of my suffering, proof that sheer, mulish determination could defy the cruelest of circumstances. Well, if it ain't Cinderella tending to her garden. The mocking drawl instantly withered the tender buds of hope blooming within me. I snapped upright to see Dale swaggering along the neat rows, his designer loafers muddied. "Get off my land!" The words sliced from my chapped lips like shards of glass. His garish shirt, no doubt purchased with our parents' fortune, strained across his pot-belly as he brayed out a contemptuous laugh. "Your land? In case you've forgotten, little sister, I own this dirt along with everything else." In 2 strides I was inches from his sneering face, shovel gripped white knuckle tight. "You arrogant son of a—" Ah. Dale waggled a pudgy finger. "That's no way to talk to your benefactor, is it? After all, I've allowed you to play princess of this pathetic patch." My knuckles ached to reshape his smug features, but I refused to grant him that satisfaction. "What do you want, Dale?" I bit out each word, "just popping by to see how my charity case is coming along." His piggish eyes raked over the pristine young vines. "Though I must admit, you've done better than I expected, Lo. This actually looks like it might become profitable." A bloom of dread sprouted in my gut at the speculative gleam in his gaze. He was here to stake his claim, leeching off the seeds I had nurtured with my blood and sweat. Sure enough, he rubbed his stubby hands together like a B-movie villain. "You know, as the sole owner, I'd be well within my rights to demand a hefty percentage of any proceeds, wouldn't you agree?" Red crept into the corners of my vision. "Like hell you will." The words hissed through my clenched jaw as I took one menacing step closer, the shovel now inches from his pampered face. For a fleeting instant, Dale's bravado wavered, a glimpse of the cowering child who used to cringe from my shadow whenever I stood up to his cruelties. But the shadow soon passed, and his chin jutted out again with feigned bravado. "You watch yourself, Lo. That temper will be your downfall." His piggy eyes narrowed to slits as he leaned in, reeking of costly cologne and hubris. "Don't forget who's in control here. This is just the start, and Mama and Daddy's money has already run dry for me, thanks to some poor investments." My heart plummeted as his meaning crystallized. He would try to rip away this one chance at redemption, leeching off my triumphs like the parasite he was. But as his wheezing laughter faded into the distance, I felt that defiant spark rekindle in my soul. I clutched the tender vines to my chest, heedless of their scratching barbs. This vineyard was my life's blood, and Dale could try to steal that from my cold, dead hands. No more cowering, no more surrendering my spirit. I would bury the vindictive bastard in success so complete, so beautifully poetic, that he choked on the bitter taste of his own defeat. The weeks after Dale's crude visit passed in a blur of frantic activity. I transformed into a relentless force of nature, my every waking moment dedicated to fortifying the vineyard's defenses. Security cameras and perimeter lighting were installed. A retired police dog, a snarling beast aptly named Brutus, patrolled the fields day and night, ready to shred any intruders to ribbons on my command. I'd be damned if I'd let that weasel Dale slither in and desecrate the delicate lifeblood pulsing through these vines after all my toil. If he wanted a fight, I'd give him a war. Margie stopped by one sweltering afternoon, shielding her eyes against the blazing sun as she surveyed the vineyard's metamorphosis with poorly concealed alarm. "Good heavens, Lorraine, this place looks more like a military compound than a vineyard these days." She flinched as Brutus's booming barks echoed across the fields. I gave the snarling canine's flanks an affectionate pat, unconcerned. "Whatever it takes to protect my investment," I stated flatly, daring her to object. The widow's withered hand fluttered to her throat as her eyes traced the newly installed security perimeter and floodlights. "But from who, honey? This level of paranoia can't be healthy." I whirled on her, fists clenched. Years of batting away her well-meaning pity bubbled up in a surge of blistering resentment. "You think this is paranoia? That bloated sack of shit who calls himself my brother seems to think he can slither in and try to steal the fruits of my sacrifice." I was nearly shouting now, nostrils flared. "Well, he's got one hell of a reckoning coming if he tries." Margie's eyes widened and she took a step backwards, gripping the faded gingham of her dress. "My, Lorraine, I've never seen you like this before." "Then you've never seen me survive before," I growled through gritted teeth. She swallowed hard, a tremor running through her frail frame. For a moment I felt a pang of regret at my outburst, but the white-hot defiance burned away any semblance of restraint. If Margie couldn't handle this side of me, that was her loss. This was the fires of my redemption being stoked, and I would let nothing and no one douse those flames. I should go." Margie's voice was barely above a terrified whisper as she backpedaled towards her car. "You do that," I called after her retreating form. "And tell anyone else around here with good intentions to stay the hell away from my vineyard." The squeal of her tires seemed to punctuate the severing of her friendship, Yet another casualty in this brutal, uphill battle. I felt a strange sense of lightness at having shed that anchor. No more would I pacify the mushy sensibilities of small-town busybodies too frail to embrace the ruthless self-preservation required for triumph over adversity. They could whisper and tut behind cup palms all they wanted. My vineyard stood as a bristling bulwark against their judgments, and against any further effort by my worm of a brother to leech away at my rebirth. This land was my dominion, and Dale would rue the day he drunkenly scrawled his signature on those damnable inheritance papers. A cruel smile played across my lips as I surveyed my fortified kingdom, visions of Dale's comeuppance dancing in my mind's eye like beautiful mirages. He would learn the true depths of my determination soon enough, and the reckoning would be as sweet as the first perfect batch of vintage I'd uncork in the face of his devastation. The rich, earthy aroma of the first harvest wafted through the air, sweet, tantalizing tendrils that represented years of agonizing sacrifice finally bearing fruit. I stood amid the vineyards, drinking in the scene of workers carefully snipping plump clusters from the vines, handling them like precious jewels. My jewels, battered and scarred from the turmoil that had birthed them, yet now glistening with the first radiant rays of success. Soon, the heady perfume of fermentation would permeate the air as these grapes transmuted into my vineyard's inaugural vintage. Just the thought sparked tremors of vindication. Grunting from exertion, I lifted another tub of grapes, savoring their lush weight, when a familiar nasal whine grated my senses. "You just can't stop rubbing it in, can you?" Dale lumbered between the rows, already sweating through his garish silk shirt from the autumn heat. I rolled my eyes but remained silent, awaiting the inevitable barrage of insults and delusional diatribes about how this triumph was rightly his. "Don't give me the silent treatment, Lorraine." He spat out my name like a rotten fruit. "You think you've won, but this is just the start." His meaty fists clenched and unclenched as he struggled to find the words. I felt a twinge of satisfaction that, for once, I had rendered the arrogant blowhard speechless. "Well, spit it out, Dale," I goaded, unable to resist twisting the knife. Red splotches mottled his cheeks, and for a fleeting instant I thought he might actually strike me before some shred of self-restraint kicked in. "You smug bitch," he hissed through clenched teeth. "This!" He swung his arm in an expansive, sweeping gesture at the vineyards. "All of this is mine. My inheritance." He jabbed a finger into my sternum, forcing me back a step, and I'll be damned if I let you wrest it from me after all the suffering you put our family through with your self-righteous martyr act all these years. A harsh laugh erupted from my lips before I could stop it. "Suffering? You mean the suffering caused by your gambling debts and shiftless lifestyle?" Dale's face purpled, and for a moment I thought he might spontaneously combust before he drew a couple of ragged breaths. "Whatever. The fact is, you had no legal right to all of this." He jabbed his finger again for emphasis. "No right at all." I opened my mouth, but he steamrolled over any response. "So consider this your first and only warning, sis." His fetid breath washed over me, tinged with the sourness of desperation and alcohol. "Give me what's mine, or I'll take it by whatever means necessary." Plucking a plump grape from the nearby bin, I locked eyes with him as I ground it between my fingers, savoring the burst of sweet juice and pulpy flesh. "You're right, Dale. This is rightfully yours." He blinked, clearly caught off guard by my easy agreement. Leaning in until our faces were mere inches apart, I allowed a single rivulet of purpled grape essence to slowly trace down my wrist. This land, this bounty, it was all a gift from our loving parents to their favorite, most deserving child. My lips peeled back in a parody of a grin. A gift they ripped from my tenacious hands and bestowed upon their shriveled, ungrateful fuck-up of a son. Dale recoiled, nostrils flaring at the caustic venom lacing every syllable. "So by all means, come take what's yours," I purred, savoring his impotent fury. "I'll be waiting for you to try, brother dear." With that, I turned on my heel and marched away, leaving him sputtering amidst the vines slowly withering into the chill of evening. They said revenge was a dish best served cold. But years in the making, this act of vengeance would be a furious inferno of retribution, one I hoped would reduce Dale's pathetic life to smoldering ash. The guttural snarl of Brutus's barks shattered the stillness of the pre-dawn darkness. I bolted upright in bed, senses instantly alert to the bestial ferocity echoing from the vineyards. Grabbing the baseball bat beside my bed, I charged out into the inky shadows, the colossal dog's furious roars rapidly growing in volume. Halfway across the field, the floodlights activated with a blinding brilliance, revealing the horrific scene. Rows upon rows of gnarled, desiccated vines, as if a rampaging army had torn through and pillaged everything in their path. No. The strangled whisper escaped my constricted throat as Brutus's barks crescendoed in my ears. A blur of movement at the edge of the illumination snapped me back to reality. I surged forward, bat gripped in a knuckle-whitening grip, to find the dog frantically lunging and clawing at the chain-link barrier separating my land from the county road. On the other side, the terrified and unmistakable visage of Dale scrambled backwards, hands shielding his face from the frenzied canine's snapping jaws as he fled in a drunken stagger. White-hot rage propelled me forward. I slammed the release on the gate and Brutus exploded through, giving pursuit as Dale flung himself into a rusted Camaro and peeled away in a shower of gravel. "That way! Get him!" I screamed uselessly over the roar of the engine as dog and car vanished in opposite directions. My limbs moved on autopilot, carrying me deeper into the wake of unimaginable devastation. Mile after mile of healthy green vines lay desecrated, reduced to twisted, scorched husks weeping desiccated tendrils onto the furrowed soil. This was not mere sabotage, it was a holocaust, an utter annihilation of everything I'd poured my soul into resurrecting from the ashes. Yet even as bile rose in my throat, engulfed by the acrid stench of charred vegetation, an ember of hope smoldered amidst the ash. Dale had been there. His presence was proof of his culpability in this atrocity. Reinvigorated, I began meticulously documenting the carnage with my phone, capturing every scrap of evidence from discarded cigarette butts to the boot prints seared into the parched earth by the inferno that had clearly raged here. By the time the first fingers of dawn crept over the horizon, hours had passed, but I'd assembled an unshakable case to unleash the full force of justice upon Dale's miserable hide. The county sheriff arrived with his deputies in tow just as I finished, expressions grim as they surveyed the apocalyptic scene. His face took on a sickly pallor at the extent of the wanton destruction. Then his gaze met mine, puffy and rimmed with soot, and understanding crept in. "Ma'am, was this—" I silently handed over my phone gallery with the timeline of evidence. The lawman's jaw clenched, giving a solemn nod before barking orders to seal off the area and coordinate with local arson investigators. His tone brooked no argument. This crime scene demanded nothing less than a full-scale, interagency call-out. Hours later, swaddled in a shock blanket as crews tromped through the devastated fields, I felt the familiar warm weight of Brutus's head on my knee. Meeting his doleful gaze, I gently stroked his cobbled fur. "I will find who did this, girl," I murmured, soaked in the stench of my adversary's despicable handiwork. "And when I do, I'll bury those demons in justice so searing, hell itself will look like a cool breeze." With those words, new fires of resolve ignited in the smoldering remains of my charred soul. This act of annihilation would not be Dale's victory, but the powder keg flashpoint that finally consumed his worthless existence in divine retribution. One way or another, reckoning would have its day. The heavy thunk of the gavel seemed to reverberate through my very bones as the judge leveled his stern gaze at the shackled form of Dale. "In light of the overwhelming evidence against you, including DNA samples from the crime scene, eyewitness testimony, and your own sloppy attempts at an alibi, this court finds you guilty." My hands clenched the bench, knuckles whitening as I awaited the words I'd yearned to hear. "Of arson, criminal mischief, and destruction of property and assets exceeding $5 million. You are hereby sentenced to 20 years in a state penitentiary, with possibility of parole after serving 18. A ragged gasp escaped Dale's trembling lips, the color draining from his ruddy face as the reality crashed over him. 20 years. A veritable life sentence for the sack of bloat who'd squandered every opportunity with reckless depravity. My lips peeled back in a feral grin as his haunted gaze found mine. I held it, letting the burning retribution in my stare bore into his crumbling facade before giving the slightest shake of my head. The realization that this systematic immolation was just the opening salvo in his world unraveling washed over Dale in crashing waves. He recoiled, mouth moving soundlessly as the bailiff swarmed, wrenching his flabby arms behind his back and marching him away forever. The tang of justice had never tasted so intoxicatingly sweet. As the courtroom emptied, I remained seated, savoring the silence and letting the weight of this culmination settle in my core. After so many years of anguish, desolation, and scorching the earth with my rage, the cycle of anguish had finally transcended. Exhaustion quickly followed, leaving me hollowed yet strangely at peace. I was free from the trauma and familial shackles that had stifled my potential for far too long. Fresh beginnings had been a bitter, uphill battle, but the summit was finally in sight. A warm weight on my shoulders startled me, and I glanced over at Eric, my lawyer and steadfast ally these past brutal months. "Congratulations, Lorraine." His words were a low rumble, heavy with understanding of how momentous this victory resonated. "The justice you fought for is finally served." I opened my mouth to offer platitudes of thanks, but Eric raised his hand, quieting me. "But my work here isn't done quite yet, not if you'll have me." He plucked a sealed manila envelope from his briefcase and extended it toward me. "This is the next step in your reckoning." Brow furrowing, I accepted the parcel, giving it an experimental shake. Something shifted inside with a faint clink of glass on glass. At Eric's nod of approval, I cracked the seal and slid out a sleek, elegant bottle filled with a ruby liquid that could only be one thing: the debut vintage of my vineyard's revival, still aging to perfection even after the devastation. My breath caught as I cradled the vessel, tracing the embossed label with a reverent fingertip. So much sacrifice, so much torment, crystallized into this humble glass flask, my greatest achievement and Dale's greatest downfall. "By all means," Eric murmured. "You've earned this moment more than anyone I know." With a trembling hand, I twisted the cork free and brought the bottle to my lips, throwing my head back as I allowed the first sublime mouthful to roll over my tongue and awaken every sense. The rich, mature body with hints of dark fruit and smoke blossomed in rapturous waves, setting my palate alight. This was ambrosia, the sweetest, most decadent nectar I could ever conceive. But beyond the taste was something deeper, more visceral and elemental: joy, redemption, and a profound, lingering bitterness that transcended mere flavors. This was the taste of vengeance finally achieved, served ice-cold and brimming with the ashes of Dale's miserable, pathetic existence. Essence of rictus grinned as this potent revelation surged through me. After decades of oppression and torment, the ultimate karma had blossomed from the soils I'd watered with my tears and sweat, justice and deliverance personified in liquid form. I would savor each and every delectable drop, letting it anoint me while bathing in the glorious retribution I had seized for myself. Every time I uncorked a bottle, I would toast to Dale's demise and my hard-won rebirth. This was the first draught of many to come from the cup of long-delayed redemption I had harvested with my own 2 hands. And oh, how ruddy and bountiful those fruits tasted upon my lips. You think you know someone, and then one day you overhear a truth so sharp, it cuts the foundation of what you thought was real. That's what happened to me on a sunny Saturday afternoon in June, at what should have been a joyful family gathering to celebrate my brother Derek's engagement to his girlfriend Elise. I arrived at my parents' house around noon, a bottle of champagne in hand. Derek greeted me at the door with a huge smile. "Marla, you made it." We hugged, and I followed him inside, where a few relatives were already mingling in the living room. I scanned the room for Elise and spotted her in the kitchen with my mom. "I'll be right back. Just going to put this in the fridge," I told Derek, heading to the kitchen. As I approached, I overheard Elise's voice, low and mocking. "And did you see that tacky ring he got me? I mean, you'd think with all his supposed success he could afford something halfway decent. But hey, once we're married, it's just a matter of time before I have access to the real money." I froze in the doorway, my stomach dropping. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Elise, the woman my brother was about to marry, was only after his money? I ducked back out of view before they noticed me, my mind reeling. "Marla, there you are." Derek appeared beside me, startling me. "Ready to get this party started?" I forced a smile onto my face. "You bet. Let's celebrate." The next few hours crawled by in a haze. I watched Elise mingle and laugh, playing the part of the blushing bride-to-be, while an icy fist clenched tighter and tighter in my gut. I couldn't stand seeing her with her arm looped through Derek's, flashing her ring and gushing about wedding plans, knowing it was all fake. As the party wound down and guests started to leave, I pulled Derek aside. "Hey, can we talk for a sec, privately?" "Sure, what's up?" He followed me out to the back patio. I took a deep breath. "Derek, I overheard something today. Something Elise said. I think she might be using you for your money." Derek's brow furrowed. "What? That's ridiculous. Elise loves me. She would never do that." "I know it sounds crazy, but I heard her myself. She was making fun of your engagement ring and talking about getting access to your money once you're married." No way. You must have misunderstood." Derek shook his head, looking at me like I'd lost my mind. "Elise is the most genuine, caring person I know. I can't believe you'd even suggest that." "I'm just trying to look out for you," I pleaded. "I know what I heard." "I think you're just jealous," he snapped. "You've always had to be the center of attention, and now that I'm happy, you can't stand it. I'm not going to let you ruin this for me." With that, he turned and stormed back inside, leaving me alone on the patio, stunned and hurt. I couldn't believe he didn't trust me. But I knew deep in my bones that I was right about Elise, and I wasn't going to rest until I could prove it, no matter what it took. I had to save my brother from that gold-digging viper masquerading as the perfect fiancé. This was only the beginning. I steeled myself for the battle ahead as I headed back inside to say my goodbyes, already forming a plan. After the disastrous confrontation with Derek at the engagement party, I spent a sleepless night tossing and turning, Elise's mocking words echoing in my head. I couldn't shake the feeling that my brother was walking blindly into a trap, and it was up to me to save him. The next morning, I called up my old friend Jenna, who worked as a private investigator. "Jenna, I need your help. It's about Derek's fiancée, Elise. I think she's bad news." "Okay, slow down," Jenna said. "What makes you think that?" I recounted what I'd overheard at the party. "I tried to warn Derek, but he wouldn't listen. He thinks I'm just jealous. But I know what I heard, Jenna. She's using him." "All right, I'll see what I can dig up. Give me a few days." True to her word, Jenna called me back 3 days later. "Marla, I think you're onto something. I did some digging into Elise's background, and let's just say her past is shadier than a palm tree in July." "What did you find?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Seems like our girl Elise has a history of latching on to wealthy men, bleeding them dry, then moving on to the next target. She's got a trail of broken hearts and empty bank accounts in her wake." "I knew it." I felt a surge of vindication, quickly followed by a chill of fear for my brother. "Jenna, I need hard evidence to convince Derek. Can you put together a report?" "Already on it. I'll email it to you by tonight." Armed with Jenna's dossier, I called Derek and asked to meet for coffee the next day. He agreed, albeit reluctantly. We met at a quiet cafe near his office. I slid the folder across the table to him. "Derek, I know you think I'm just being a jealous sister, but please, hear me out. Jenna did some digging on Elise, and it's not good." Derek's jaw clenched as he flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the damning evidence. Bank statements, court records, testimonials from jilted exes. It painted a clear picture of Elise as a manipulative, gold-digging con artist. This can't be real," Derek muttered, but I could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Derek. I know this must be hard to see, but you had to know the truth about her." He slammed the folder shut. "I need to think," he said abruptly, standing up. Don't tell anyone about this, okay? I need to figure out what to do." I watched him go, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. I knew I'd done the right thing, but I also knew this was far from over. 2 days later, I got a text from Derek. "You were right. Confronted Elise. Wedding's off. I owe you an apology." I breathed a sigh of relief, but it was short-lived. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" Elise's voice was cold with fury. "You just couldn't keep your nose out of it." "Derek deserved to know the truth about you," I shot back. "You're nothing but a lying, manipulative—" "Shut up," she hissed. "You have no idea who you're messing with, you pathetic busybody. I have powerful friends, and I'll make you regret the day you crossed me. This isn't over." The line went dead, and I sat frozen, my heart racing. What had I gotten myself into? But I couldn't back down now. I had to see this through, for Derek's sake. Elise wanted a fight? Bring it on. Elise's threat hung over me like a dark cloud in the days that followed. I jumped at every unfamiliar noise, checked over my shoulder constantly, and had trouble sleeping. But I tried to push through the fear and focus on being there for Derek. He was devastated by Elise's betrayal, but he put on a brave face. I just can't believe I was so blind, he said as we shared a somber drink at his place. Looking back, there were so many red flags. I feel like such a fool. She had us all fooled, I reassured him. The important thing is you found out the truth before it was too late. Derek managed a weak smile. Thanks to you. I'm sorry I didn't believe you at first. I should have known you'd always have my back. That's what family's for, I said, squeezing his hand. But even as I comforted Derek, I couldn't shake the feeling that Elise was out there somewhere, plotting her revenge. My fears were confirmed a week later when I got a call from Jenna. Marla, you need to be careful, she said urgently. I've been hearing whispers that Elise is on the warpath. She's been reaching out to some seriously shady characters, calling in favors. I think she's coming for you. A chill ran down my spine. What do I do, Jenna? Watch your back, upgrade your security system, and maybe consider getting out of town for a while, just until things blow over. But I couldn't just run and hide, not when Derek was still picking up the pieces of his shattered life. He had thrown himself into planning an extravagant charity gala, saying he needed something to keep him busy and take his mind off Elise. I don't know, Derek, I said when he told me about it. Do you really think a big flashy event is a good idea right now? Maybe we should keep a low profile. Nonsense, he said with forced cheer. The show must go on. Besides, it's for a good cause. I could really use your help pulling it all together. I hesitated, thinking of Jenna's warning, but the pleading look in Derek's eyes won me over. All right. I'm in. Let's make this an event to remember. We threw ourselves into the preparations, and for a while, I was able to push thoughts of Elise and her threats to the back of my mind, but they came rushing back with a vengeance 2 days before the gala. I was at Derek's place, going over the final guest list, when his phone buzzed with an incoming text. He glanced at it and went pale. It's from Elise. My blood ran cold. What does it say? With shaking hands, he showed me the screen. Looks like you're going to have a full house at your little party. Shame if something were to happen to all those nice rich people. But I'm sure you've got great security, right? Hate for there to be any accidents. I felt sick. Derek, you have to cancel the gala. This is serious. She's threatening people's lives. He sank into a chair, head in his hands. I can't. It's too late. Everything's already paid for. The invitations are out. I'll hire extra security. Take every precaution. I knelt in front of him, forcing him to meet my eyes. Derek, listen to me. No event is worth risking innocent lives. You have to shut it down. We'll find another way to support the charity, but this ends now. For a moment he hesitated, fear and indecision warring on his face. Then his expression hardened with resolve. You're right. I'll make the calls. The gala's off. He stood and walked out of the room, phone already at his ear. I slumped back against the couch, letting out a shaky breath. We'd averted one disaster. But I knew, deep in my bones, that this was only the beginning of Elise's revenge, and I had no idea just how far she would go. The fallout from canceling the gala was immediate and intense. Derek was bombarded with angry calls and emails from guests demanding explanations, vendors demanding compensation, and the charity expressing disappointment at the lost funding. He handled it all with grim determination, apologizing profusely and absorbing the financial hits, but I could see the toll it was taking on him. I'm sorry, Derek, I said for the 100th time as we sat in his living room, surrounded by the detritus of the canceled event. Unused invitations, seating charts, catering menus. I know how much this meant to you. He shook his head warily. It's not your fault, Marla. You were right to insist on canceling. I just wish... He trailed off, his eyes distant. I understood. He wished he'd never met Elise, never fallen for her lies, wished he could go back to his life before she'd poisoned it. In the days that followed, I watched helplessly as my once vibrant, outgoing brother retreated into himself. He went through the motions at work, but the spark was gone from his eyes. He stopped returning friends' calls, stopped going out. It was like Elise had stolen a piece of his soul, and he didn't know how to get it back. I knew I had to do something, so I made a decision, one that I knew Derek wouldn't like. I was going to confront Elise directly. Using the information Jenna had gathered, I tracked Elise down to a high-end spa on the outskirts of town. I staked out the parking lot, and when I saw her emerging, I stepped out of my car and blocked her path. "We need to talk," I said, my voice hard. Elise looked me up and down with a sneer. Well, if it isn't the meddling sister, what do you want?" "I want you to leave my brother alone. Stop threatening him. Stop trying to ruin his life. Just walk away." She laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "Oh, sweetie, you have no idea who you're dealing with, do you? You think you can just order me around like one of your little office lackeys?" She stepped closer, her eyes glinting with malice. "I will destroy you. I will take everything and everyone you love, starting with your precious brother, and I will burn it all to the ground, and there's not a damn thing you can do to stop me." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. "You're wrong. Derek knows what you are now. He's done with you." "Is that so? Then why has he been calling me, begging me to take him back?" My heart stopped. "You're lying." Elise held up her phone, showing me her call log. Derek's name, over and over. Poor thing is so broken up about losing me. It's only a matter of time before he comes crawling back. And when he does, I'll bleed him for every penny, and I'll make sure he knows it's all your fault. Red rage clouded my vision. Before I knew what I was doing, I lashed out, slapping the phone from her hand. It clattered to the pavement, the screen shattering. Elise's eyes burned with fury. "You'll pay for that, you bitch," she hissed, lunging for me. I braced myself, but before she could make contact, a voice rang out. "That's enough." We both turned to see Jenna striding toward us, a fierce expression on her face. "Elise Stanton, I'm placing you under citizen's arrest for extortion, threats, and multiple counts of fraud." Elise gaped at her. "You can't do that." "Oh, I can, and I am. I've got enough evidence to put you away for a long time. Boys?" She nodded to two burly men who had appeared behind her. "Cuff her." As they wrestled a screaming, cursing Elise into a waiting car, Jenna turned to me. "You okay?" I let out a shaky breath. "I will be. Thank you, Jenna, for everything." She hugged me. "That's what friends are for. It's over, Marla. She can't hurt you or Derek anymore." I wanted to believe her, but as I watched the car carry Elise away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from the end. If anything, the real battle was just beginning. Elise's arrest should have been the end of it, but deep down I knew better. Someone as manipulative and well-connected as her wouldn't go down without a fight. And I was right. Less than 24 hours after Jenna had taken her into custody, I got a call. "She's out," Jenna said without preamble. Somehow made bail. My blood turned to ice in my veins. "How is that possible? I thought you said the evidence against her was airtight." "It is," Jenna said grimly. "But seems she's got friends in high places. Some hotshot lawyer swooped in, greased some palms. I'm sorry, Marla. I thought we had her." I took a deep, steadying breath. "It's not your fault, Jenna. You did everything you could. This just means we have to be extra careful. She'll be coming for us now. For me." I hung up and immediately called Derek, warning him about Elise's release and pleading with him to be cautious and alert. He was shaken but resolute. "We won't let her terrorize us anymore," he vowed. "It's time we put an end to this, once and for all." Easier said than done. Over the next few days, Elise's campaign of harassment and intimidation kicked into high gear. I received threatening messages. My car was vandalized, and I could swear I was being followed everywhere I went. Derek experienced similar incidents. Slashed tires, ominous packages left on his doorstep. It was psychological warfare, designed to make us feel vulnerable and afraid in our own lives. But we weren't about to back down. With Jenna's help, we started gathering even more evidence against Elise. Records of her past cons, testimonies from her previous marks, anything that would help ensure a conviction and a long sentence. It was risky, poking the hornet's nest, but we were determined to build an unassailable case. All the while, I was looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows. The worst part was not knowing when or how Elise would strike. The anticipation was its own kind of torture. It all came to a head a week later. Derek called me, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Marla, she's here. Elise, she's in my apartment." My heart seized. "What? How? Derek, get out of there now. I'm calling the police." "No, No police. She says if we involve the authorities, she'll hurt Mom and Dad. Marla, I don't know what to do. Stay calm, I said, though I was anything but calm myself. I'm on my way. Just keep her talking, okay? Don't let her do anything rash. I broke every speed limit racing to Derek's place, all the while trying to come up with a plan. By the time I burst through his door, my heart was hammering out of my chest. I found them in the living room, Derek white-faced and shaking, Elise cool and composed with a smug smile playing about her lips. Ah, Marla, so good of you to join us, she purred. Elise, I said evenly, fighting to keep my voice steady. You need to leave, now. She laughed. Oh, I don't think so. You see, Derek and I were just coming to an understanding, weren't we, darling? Derek wouldn't meet my eyes, his head down. Elise continued. Here's how it's going to go. You two are going to drop this little crusade against me. All the evidence, all the witnesses. It all disappears. And in return, I'll let your family live in peace. Refuse. And well, I can't be held responsible for what might happen to poor, sweet Mom and Dad. Rage and terror warred within me. This was the showdown I'd been dreading and anticipating. The moment of truth. I looked at Elise, at her cruel, triumphant face, and I knew I had a choice to make. Surrender to her threats and live under her thumb forever, or fight back with everything I had and risk it all. In that moment, staring into the face of evil, I made my decision. I squared my shoulders, looked her dead in the eye, and said the words that would change everything. Bring it on, bitch. Elise's eyes narrowed at my defiance. You're making a big mistake, Marla. You have no idea what I'm capable of. No, Elise, you're the one who's mistaken. I shot back, my voice steady, despite the fear churning in my gut. You've underestimated me, my brother, and the power of the truth, and that's going to be your downfall. I turned to Derek, who was watching our exchange with wide, anxious eyes. Derek, it's time. We're ending this now. With shaking hands, Derek pulled out his phone and sent a single text. Moments later, the apartment door burst open, and in poured Jenna and a team of police officers. Elise whirled around, her face contorting with rage. What is this? She snarled. Jenna stepped forward, a fierce smile on her face. This, Elise, is a sting operation. We've been recording everything. Every threat, every admission of guilt. It's all on tape. Realization dawned on Elise's face, quickly replaced by pure, unadulterated fury. She lunged at me, screaming incoherently, but the officers were too quick. They had her restrained and cuffed in seconds. As they led her away, Elise twisted in their grip to face me, her eyes burning with hatred. This isn't over, Marla, she shrieked. I'll destroy you for this. I'll destroy all of you. Then she was gone, her manic threats echoing in the sudden stillness of the apartment. I turned to Derek, my knees weak with relief. We did it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We got her. He pulled me into a fierce hug, his whole body trembling. I'm so sorry, Marla, for everything. I should have listened to you from the start. It's okay, I murmured, holding him tight. It's over now. We're safe. But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't entirely true. Elise might be in custody, but her venom ran deep. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a whole new battle. That battle began in earnest at Elise's trial. Despite the mountain of evidence against her, she fought tooth and nail, her high-priced lawyers using every dirty trick in the book to try and discredit our testimony. On the stand, under the heat of the defense's cross-examination, I felt like I was the one on trial. They painted me as a jealous, manipulative sister, twisting my every word against me. But I held firm, clinging to the truth like a lifeline. Derek faced even worse in his testimony, forced to relive the pain and humiliation of Elise's betrayal. But he too stood strong, his voice never wavering as he laid bare the depths of her deceit. And then, the moment we'd been waiting for. Jenna took the stand, and one by one, she presented the recordings, the documents, the irrefutable proof of Elise's crimes. With each piece of evidence, I watched Elise's composure crack, her icy facade melting under the heat of her own incriminating words. In the end, the jury deliberated for less than an hour. When the verdict came back, the courtroom erupted, guilty on all counts. Elise was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of more time pending further investigation into her past crimes. As they led her away in cuffs, Elise shot me one last venomous glare. Rot in hell, she hissed. Both of you. I just smiled, feeling the weight of months of fear and stress lift from my shoulders. Enjoy prison, Elise. I hear orange is the new black. Derek and I walked out of the courthouse into the blinding sunlight, hand in hand. It was over. We were free. But as we stepped into the world ready to rebuild our lives, I couldn't shake one nagging thought. Elise still had powerful allies, a network of corruption and deceit. Was this truly the end? Or was it just a temporary reprieve in a war that was far from over? Only time would tell. But one thing I knew for certain, whatever battles lay ahead, Derek and I would face them together. And together, we were unbreakable. The morning after Elise's conviction, I woke to the shrill ring of my phone. Bleary-eyed, I glanced at the caller ID. Derek. A cold knot formed in my stomach as I answered. Derek, what's wrong? Turn on the news, he said, his voice strained. Now. I fumbled for the remote, my heart pounding. The TV flickered to life, and there she was. Elise, being led out of the courthouse in cuffs, a reporter shoving a microphone in her face. Miss Stanton, do you have any comment on the allegations that you bribed a juror in your trial? My blood turned to ice. Bribery? But before I could even process the implications, Elise spoke. I have been wrongfully convicted, she declared, her voice ringing with righteous indignation. And I know exactly who's behind this travesty of justice, Marla Newman. The camera cut to a picture of me, and I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. What was she doing? Marla was obsessed with me, jealous of my relationship with her brother, Elise continued, her eyes wild. She orchestrated this entire thing to destroy me. She threatened me, blackmailed me, and now she's tampering with the jury to make sure I go down. That's insane, I shouted at the screen. She's lying. But the reporter was already running with it. Shocking allegations from the convicted con artist Elise Stanton. Could this be a case of a vengeful sister going too far? Stay tuned as we investigate these explosive claims. I clicked off the TV, numb with shock and fury. She was doing it again, twisting the truth to paint herself as the victim. And now she was dragging me down with her. My phone exploded with notifications, texts, emails, social media tags, everyone wanting to know if it was true, if I really was the psycho-obsessed sister Elise made me out to be. I called Jenna in a panic. You have to do something, I pleaded. She's destroying me. Jenna was already on it. We'll counter her lies with the truth, she assured me. I've got your back, Marla. We all do. But the damage was done. Over the next few days, despite Jenna's efforts, the media latched onto Elise's narrative. Every mistake I'd ever made, every flaw and imperfection was dredged up and put on display. My life became a waking nightmare of harassment and accusations. Even Derek began to doubt. Are you sure you didn't, I don't know, maybe go a little too far? He asked hesitantly one night. I stared at him, hurt and disbelief rendering me speechless. After everything, how could he even question me? Seeing my face, he backpedaled. I'm sorry, I didn't mean, I know you'd never do what she's accusing you of, I'm scared, Marla. I softened, pulling him into a hug. I know, I am too, but we can't let her win. We have to fight. And fight we did. Jenna worked tirelessly to discredit Elise's claims, to prove that the bribery allegations were just another desperate ploy from a cornered liar. Slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. Then, a bombshell. One of Elise's old associates came forward, offering proof that Elise herself had orchestrated the bribery scandal in a last-ditch effort to force a mistrial and escape justice. It was the final nail in her coffin. The story exploded, and suddenly everyone who had doubted me was falling over themselves to apologize, to distance themselves from the disgraced con artist. I watched it all unfold with a grim satisfaction, but no real joy. Because even though Elise was finally truly defeated, the scars she left remained. The doubt, the mistrust, the knowledge that someone I had once welcomed into my life could be so manipulative, so cruel. It would take time to heal, to rebuild what she had tried to destroy. But as I sat with Derek, watching as Elise was led away in cuffs once more, I knew one thing for certain. We had won. And no matter what lies Elise tried to spin, no matter what darkness she tried to spread, the truth would always prevail. Derek and I, our bond, was stronger than her hate. And that was a victory she could never take away. In the weeks following Elise's final downfall, life slowly began to return to normal, or as normal as it could be, after everything we'd been through. Derek threw himself into his work, determined to rebuild his reputation and his life. I stood by his side, supporting him every step of the way. But Elise's shadow still lingered. Despite being behind bars, her venom continued to spread. Nasty rumors circulated online. Old associates of hers came out of the woodwork with sordid tales of her past. It seemed her network of deceit ran even deeper than we'd imagined. One day, I received a chilling email from an anonymous sender. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what's coming," it read. "Elise has friends in high places. Watch your back." I showed the message to Jenna, my hands shaking. "It never ends," I said, my voice breaking. "She's still tormenting us, even from prison." Jenna's face hardened with resolve. "We'll find out who sent this," she vowed, "and we'll make sure they face consequences, just like Elise." True to her word, Jenna launched an investigation, and what she uncovered was staggering. Elise's web of corruption extended far beyond what we'd ever imagined. Crooked lawyers, dirty cops, even a judge or two in her pocket. It was a hydra of deceit, and every time we cut off one head, two more seemed to sprout in its place. But we kept fighting. Derek and I gave interviews, telling our story, exposing Elise's lies. Slowly, the tide of public opinion began to turn. Elise's empire crumbled, her allies scattering like rats from a sinking ship. Finally, the day of reckoning came. Elise and her co-conspirators were brought up on a slew of new charges: racketeering, obstruction of justice, witness tampering. It was the trial of the century, and Derek and I were the star witnesses. On the stand, facing Elise once more, I felt a strange calm settle over me. She glared at me, her eyes full of impotent rage, but I stared back unflinching. She had no power over me anymore. "Tell the court what happened, Marla," the prosecutor prompted. And I did. I told my story, our story, holding nothing back. I laid bare every manipulation, every cruel machination, and as I spoke, I watched Elise's face contort with fury, then fear, then finally defeat. The verdict was swift and unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Elise was sentenced to an additional 20 years, her allies receiving similarly harsh sentences. It was over. Really, truly over. As they led Elise out of the courtroom for the last time, she twisted in the officer's grip to face me. "I'll get out someday," she snarled. "And when I do, I'll come for you. I'll make you pay for this." I just smiled sadly. "No, Elise, you won't. You're going to spend the rest of your life in a cage, with nothing but your anger and your regrets for company, and that's a fate far worse than anything you could ever do to me." With that, I turned my back on her, walking out of the courthouse and into the sunlight. Derek was waiting for me, a tentative smile on his face. "Is it really over?" he asked. I took his hand, squeezing it tight. "It's over. She can't hurt us anymore. We're free." And as we walked away, hand in hand, I felt a lightness in my heart that I hadn't known in years. The nightmare was finally over. And while the scars would always remain, I knew that Derek and I would heal, together. We had each other. We had the truth. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Elise had tried to destroy us, but she had only made us stronger. Our bond was unbreakable, forged in the fire of her hatred. And as we faced the future, unsure but unafraid, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them head-on, side by side. Because that's what family does. And Derek and I? We were family, now and always. I never knew silence could be so loud until I watched my brother's facade crumble, revealing a stranger beneath. The words seemed to echo in the stillness of the room, hanging like a dense fog after Marla's venomous attack on our mother, Elaine. Her lips curled into a smirk as she taunted, "You're just too meek and insignificant to stand up for yourself." I glanced at Everett, my brother, expecting him to defend our gentle mother, but he remained impassive. A hollow shell of the man I once knew. It was as if Marla's venom had seeped into his veins, numbing him to her cruelty. Rage boiled within me, and I found myself stepping forward, fists clenched. "How dare you speak to her that way?" I spat, my voice trembling with fury. Marla's eyes narrowed, and she sneered. "Stay out of this, Cadence. It doesn't concern you." "Like hell it doesn't," I roared, closing the distance between us. "That's my mother you're berating, and I won't stand for it." Everett finally stirred, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Cadence, please, let it go." I shrugged him off, incredulous. "Let it go? Are you hearing yourself? She's treating Mom like garbage, and you're just letting it happen." Marla's laughter cut through the tension like a knife. "Poor, pathetic Elaine. She's lucky I even bother with her." She turned to Everett, her voice dripping with saccharine venom. "You see how she is, darling? Always needing to be coddled and fawned over." Everett's gaze dropped, and he nodded meekly, like a puppy being scolded. My heart broke for the brother I once knew, the confident, caring man who would have never tolerated such abuse. "Enough!" I roared, stepping between them. "I don't know what kind of twisted game you're playing, Marla, but it ends now. You will treat my mother with respect, or you can pack your bags and leave." Marla's eyes with fury, and for a moment I thought she might strike me. But then, as quickly as the storm had gathered, it dissipated, and she offered a sickly sweet smile. "Of course, Cadence, you're absolutely right. I'll be sure to watch my tongue around dear Elaine from now on." She swept past me, brushing my shoulder with hers as she exited the room. Everett followed her like a lost puppy, leaving me alone with my stunned mother. I gathered her into my arms, feeling her frail body tremble with silent sobs. "It's okay, Mom," I murmured, stroking her graying hair. "I won't let her hurt you anymore." As I held her close, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Marla's true nature had been revealed, and I knew in my heart that I had to protect my family, no matter the cost. The next few days were like walking on eggshells, each interaction fraught with tension. Marla's saccharine smiles were laced with venom, and Everett remained a hollow shell, refusing to acknowledge the rift that had formed. It wasn't until I stopped by Mom's house unannounced that the full extent of Marla's villainy became apparent. "Mom?" I called out as I stepped inside, taken aback by the unusual disarray. Dishes were piled high in the sink, and the floors were in desperate need of a vacuum. "In here, dear," came her weary voice from the living room. I found her slumped in her favorite armchair, a blanket draped over her lap as she knitted what appeared to be a scarf. Dark circles hung beneath her eyes, and her movements were slow and labored. "Mom, are you all right?" I asked, crossing the room to her side. She offered a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, darling. Just a bit tired, that's all." I frowned, taking in her disheveled appearance and the state of the house. "Have you been cooking and cleaning for Everett and Marla again?" Her gaze dropped, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. White-hot anger flared within me. "That's it. I'm putting a stop to this right now." Before she could protest, I was out the door and marching down the street towards Everett's place. I pounded on the door, barely containing my fury. Everett answered, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Cadence? What's going on?" "What's going on?" I echoed, jabbing a finger into his chest. "Your wife is running my mother ragged. That's what's going on." His eyes widened, and he glanced over his shoulder as if afraid Marla might overhear. "Keep your voice down," he hissed, stepping outside and pulling the door shut behind him. "I won't keep my voice down," I shouted, uncaring of who might hear. "Mom is exhausted, Everett. She's cooking, cleaning, and running herself into the ground just to keep Marla happy." He ran a hand over his face, his expression pained. I know. But Marla, she gets upset if things aren't just so." I stared at him, aghast. "Are you hearing yourself? You're letting her walk all over Mom because she throws a tantrum if she doesn't get her way?" Everett's shoulders slumped, and he dropped his gaze. "It's not that simple, Cadence. Marla, she has a way of making things difficult if I don't go along with what she wants." My hands balled into fists at my sides. "So what, you're just going to let her bully and manipulate all of us? Stand up for yourself, Everett. Stand up for our family." His jaw clenched, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the brother I once knew. But then, just as quickly, it was gone, and he shook his head wearily. "I can't, Cadence. I'm sorry." With those words, he retreated back into the house, leaving me seething on the doorstep. As I stormed away, I knew that this was only the beginning. Marla's twisted grip on my family was tightening, and I had to find a way to break it before it was too late. Frustration gnawed at me in the days that followed. Everett's submission to Marla's twisted demands was like watching a man slowly drown, and I knew I had to act before it was too late. "We need to find out more about her," I told Theo one evening as we prepared dinner. My husband's brow furrowed, but he nodded, sensing the resolve in my voice. That night, after the dishes were done, we began our search. Scouring the internet for any trace of Marla's past, we slowly pieced together a disturbing pattern. "Look at this," Theo murmured, his eyes glued to the screen. It seems Marla was briefly married to a wealthy businessman a few years back, but the marriage only lasted 6 months before he filed for divorce, citing emotional distress and manipulation. I leaned closer, my heart sinking as I read the details. And here's another. She was engaged to a prominent lawyer, but he broke it off after discovering she'd been lying about her background and finances. Page after page painted a chilling portrait of a woman who thrived on deceit and exploitation. Marla would charm and seduce wealthy men, leeching off their fortunes until they inevitably saw through her facade. Then she would move on to her next target, leaving a trail of broken hearts and empty bank accounts in her wake. "She's a black widow," I whispered, feeling ill, "and Everett is her latest victim." Theo squeezed my hand, his expression grim. "We have to show him, Cadence. We have to make him see the truth before it's too late." I nodded, my jaw set with determination. The next day, I invited Everett over under the guise of a casual family dinner. As we sat around the table, I could see the tension in his posture, the way his eyes kept flicking towards the door, as if he expected Marla to burst in at any moment. "Everett," I began, keeping my voice level, "we need to talk about Marla." He stiffened, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the table. "What about her?" I took a steadying breath and launched into the details we'd uncovered, the string of failed marriages and broken engagements, the pattern of exploitation and deceit. As I spoke, I watched the color drain from Everett's face. He shook his head vehemently, his eyes wide with denial. No, you've got it all wrong. Marla would never." But the evidence was irrefutable, and with each new revelation, I could see the cracks in his facade deepening. Finally, when I had laid bare the full extent of Marla's machinations, Everett slumped in his chair, burying his face in his hands. "How could I have been so blind?" he whispered, his voice thick with anguish. I reached across the table, resting my hand on his arm. "It's not too late, Everett. We can stop her before she destroys our family." He lifted his head, and I saw a flicker of the old Everett, the fierce determination that had once burned so brightly. "You're right," he said, his jaw set. "It's time to end this." As we began to formulate our plan, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. The veil had been lifted, and now it was time to take back control from the woman who had wrought so much pain and misery. The confrontation with Marla was like a powder keg waiting to ignite. Everett and I had agreed to approach her together, our united front bolstered by the damning evidence we'd uncovered. I could sense Everett's trepidation as we stood on the doorstep of his home, but there was a newfound determination in his eyes that filled me with hope. Marla answered the door, her perfectly coiffed hair and immaculate makeup a stark contrast to the sneer that twisted her features. Well, if it isn't the dynamic duo," she drawled, her gaze flickering between us with thinly veiled disdain. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Cut the act, Marla," I spat, pushing past her into the house. "We know what you've been up to." Her brows shot up, but her expression remained infuriatingly smug. "And what, pray tell, have I been up to?" Everett stepped forward, squaring his shoulders. "We know about your past, Marla. The marriages, the engagements, all the men you've manipulated and exploited for their money." For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a derisive laugh. "Oh, Everett, you can't possibly believe these ridiculous accusations, can you?" She sidled up to him, trailing a manicured hand down his arm. "Your sister is just jealous, darling. She's always resented our happiness." I opened my mouth to protest, but Everett held up a hand, his gaze boring into hers. "Don't bother, Marla," he said, his voice low and steady. "We have proof, documents, records, testimonies from your past victims. It's over." Her eyes narrowed to slits, and for the first time I saw the true depths of her malice laid bare. "You ungrateful wretch," she hissed, her words dripping with venom. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" Everett remained unmoved, his jaw set in a firm line. "You've done nothing but lie and manipulate, Marla. It ends now." With a snarl of rage, she turned on me, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my arm as she grabbed me. "This is all you're doing, you meddling bitch," she spat, her face contorted in fury. "You're just jealous that your pathetic life will never measure up to mine." Before I could react, Everett had wedged himself between us, his hands gripping Marla's wrists as he pried her away. "That's enough," he growled, his eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't seen in years. "You're done manipulating this family, Marla. It's over." She struggled against his grip, her eyes wild with desperation. "You'll regret this, Everett," she shrieked. "I'll make sure you lose everything. Your job, your money, your precious family." But her threats rang hollow, her carefully constructed facade lying in shattered pieces at our feet. As Everett hauled her towards the door, she turned her vitriol on me once more. "You think you've won?" she snarled. "This is far from over, Cadence. Mark my words, you'll pay for this." And with that, she was gone, her angry screams echoing down the street as Everett slammed the door behind her. We stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of what had transpired hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Everett turned to me, his expression a mixture of shame and gratitude. "Thank you," he murmured, pulling me into a fierce embrace. "You saved me from a lifetime of misery." As I held him, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph amidst the turmoil. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Marla's threats still lingered, a reminder that her vindictive nature knew no bounds. But in that moment, with my brother by my side once more, I knew we could weather any storm she threw our way. The family she had tried so desperately to fracture was now stronger than ever, and we would face her wrath together, united and unbreakable. In the days following Marla's explosive departure, a fragile peace settled over our family. Everett seemed lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders, but I knew better than to let my guard down. Marla's parting threat still echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was biding her time, plotting her next move. So when Theo came to me one evening, his expression grim, I steeled myself for the worst. "Cadence," he began, settling beside me on the couch. "I think we have a problem." My heart dropped, and I braced myself for whatever bombshell he was about to unleash. "I just got off the phone with your dad," he continued. "Apparently, Marla has been pressuring Everett to sell the family home." A chill ran down my spine as the implications sank in. The house wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of our family's legacy, a place where countless memories had been forged. "She's trying to isolate him," I murmured, my hands clenching into fists. "Strip away everything that ties him to us so she can worm her way back in." Theo nodded grimly. "Your dad said Everett has been reluctant, but Marla is relentless. She's playing on his guilt, telling him it's the only way to make a fresh start." White-hot anger surged through me, and I shot to my feet, pacing the length of the living room. "That conniving snake," I spat. "After everything she's done, she still has the audacity to try and tear our family apart." Theo caught my arm, pulling me to a halt. "Cadence, we have to do something. If she succeeds in getting Everett to sell the house, it'll be that much harder to break her hold over him." I took a deep breath, tamping down the fury that threatened to consume me. Theo was right. We needed a plan, a way to make Everett see the truth before it was too late. "Call Dad," I said, my voice steely with resolve. "Tell him we're staging an intervention tonight. It's time to put an end to Marla's games once and for all." A few hours later, we were gathered in the living room of the family home. Mom, Dad, Everett, Theo, and myself. The tension was thick, Everett's eyes darting toward the exits as if he expected Marla to burst through the door at any moment. "What's this all about?" he demanded, his gaze finally landing on me. I took a steadying breath, squaring my shoulders. "It's about Marla," I said, holding his gaze, "and her latest attempt to manipulate you into selling this house." His eyes widened and he opened his mouth to protest, but I forged ahead. "Don't try to deny it, Everett. We know she's been pressuring you, playing on your guilt and insecurities. But can't you see? This is just another ploy to isolate you from your family, to make you dependent on her again." Everett's jaw clenched, and he shook his head vehemently. "You're wrong, Cadence. Marla just wants what's best for us, a fresh start away from all the drama and conflict." I scoffed, feeling the frustration mount. "Wake up, Everett. She's the one causing all the drama and conflict. She's a toxic parasite, and she'll never stop until she's drained every last ounce of life from this family." The words hung heavy in the air, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw Mom rise from her chair, her face etched with a determination I'd never seen before. "Your sister is right, Everett," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. That woman's caused nothing but pain and misery since the day she wormed her way into our lives. She crossed the room, laying a hand on his arm. This house is our home, our legacy. Please don't let her take that away from us. Everett's gaze flickered between us, his expression a whirlwind of emotions. I could see the battle raging within him, the struggle between Marla's poisonous influence and the love for his family. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "You're right," he whispered, his voice thick with shame. "I've been so blind, so desperate to make things work with Marla that I've nearly lost everything that truly matters." He looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I won't let her win, not this time. The house stays, and Marla—" He swallowed hard. "Marla is out of our lives for good." A collective sigh of relief swept through the room, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, love and loyalty had prevailed over Marla's twisted machinations. As we gathered around Everett, enveloping him in an embrace, I knew that our family was finally on the path to healing. The shadows that had lingered for so long were fading, and a new dawn was on the horizon. One where Marla's poisonous influence could no longer reach us. The day of Mom's birthday celebration dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. As I helped her prepare for the party, arranging platters of her famous lemon bars and hanging streamers, I couldn't shake the sense of anticipation that buzzed through my veins. This was it. The culmination of weeks of planning, the moment when we would finally expose Marla's true nature to the world and break her hold over Everett once and for all. "You seem tense, dear," Mom murmured, laying a gentle hand on my arm. "Is everything all right?" I forced a smile, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Everything's fine, Mom. Just want to make sure your party is perfect." She returned my smile, her eyes shining with affection. "As long as my family is here, it will be." As the guests began to arrive, the house filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation, a temporary reprieve from the turmoil that had plagued us for far too long. Everett arrived with a hesitant smile, his gaze constantly flicking towards the door as if expecting Marla to make an appearance. "It's going to be all right," I murmured, pulling him aside. "We're going to put an end to her lies once and for all." He nodded, his jaw set with determination, and rejoined the party. As the afternoon wore on, I could feel the tension mounting, the calm before the storm. Finally, when the last of the guests had arrived, I caught Theo's eye and gave him a subtle nod. It was time. Clearing my throat, I clinked my glass, calling for silence. "If I could have everyone's attention, please." The room gradually fell quiet, all eyes turning towards me with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. "First and foremost," I began, "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate my incredible mother on her birthday." A smattering of applause rippled through the crowd, and Mom ducked her head shyly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "However," I continued, my voice growing steely, "there is another reason we've gathered you all here today." I locked eyes with Everett, giving him a subtle nod of encouragement before turning my attention back to the assembled guests. For far too long, a dark shadow has loomed over this family, a poisonous presence that has sought to divide and manipulate us for her own selfish gain. My gaze swept over the crowd, daring anyone to look away. I'm speaking, of course, about Marla. A hush fell over the room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Everett tense, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the back of a chair. "Marla has woven a tangled web of lies and deceit," I pressed on, my voice ringing with conviction. "She has exploited and preyed upon my brother, leeching off his fortune and manipulating him into cutting ties with those who truly care about him." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the crowd, but I forged ahead, laying bare the evidence we had gathered, the trail of broken engagements and failed marriages, the testimonies from her past victims. As I spoke, I could see the shock and revulsion etched on the faces of our guests, the realization sinking in that they had been duped by Marla's carefully constructed facade. Finally, when every last sordid detail had been exposed, I turned my gaze to Everett, who stood frozen, his eyes wide with a mixture of shame and relief. "It's over, Everett," I said softly. "You're free of her poison." For a long moment he remained motionless, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Then, Slowly, he straightened his shoulders, his features hardening with a newfound resolve. "You're right, Cadence," he said, his voice ringing out across the hushed room. "It's over." Turning on his heel, he strode towards the front door, throwing it open with a resounding bang, and there, frozen on the doorstep with a look of abject horror painted across her features, stood Marla. "You," she sputtered, her perfectly manicured mask cracking as she took in the scene before her. "You can't do this to me." But her protests fell on deaf ears as Everett advanced, his eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't seen in years. "Get out," he growled, his words laced with a finality that brooked no argument. "You're not welcome here. Not anymore." For a beat, Marla seemed poised to argue, her mouth opening and closing like a gasping fish. But as her gaze swept over the sea of accusatory stares, she must have realized the futility of her situation. With a cry of outrage, she whirled on her heel and stormed off into the night, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement as she disappeared from sight. A deafening silence hung in her wake, punctuated only by the occasional murmur or cough. Then, slowly, the tension began to dissipate, replaced by a collective sigh of relief. As I looked around at the faces of my family and friends, I saw nothing but pride and support reflected back at me. We had faced down the darkness that had threatened to consume us, and emerged victorious, battered perhaps, but unbroken. And as Everett turned to me, his eyes shining with unshed tears, I knew that our journey towards healing had truly begun. In the days that followed Marla's explosive banishment from our lives, a palpable shift seemed to ripple through our family. It was as if a great weight had been lifted, a toxic cloud of negativity and manipulation that had hung over us for far too long. Everett, in particular, seemed to undergo a profound transformation. Gone was the haunted, hollow-eyed man who had been so thoroughly cowed by Marla's venom. In his place stood a man reborn, his shoulders squared and his gaze clear and focused. "It's like waking from a nightmare," he confided in me one evening as we sat on the porch, sipping lemonade and basking in the warm evening air. All this time, I was living in a fog, blind to the truth and trapped by her lies. I reached over, giving his hand a reassuring squeeze. "You're free of her now, Everett. We all are." He nodded, his expression solemn. "I just wish I had seen it sooner, before she had the chance to inflict so much pain and damage." A familiar pang of guilt twisted in my gut, but I pushed it aside. Dwelling on regrets would only hold us back from truly healing. "The important thing is that we made it through," I said firmly, "and now we can focus on rebuilding and moving forward as a family." Everett smiled, the weight of Marla's lingering specter seeming to lift from his shoulders. "You're right. It's a new beginning for all of us." As the days stretched into weeks, the true extent of Marla's deception began to unravel. It seemed that her pattern of exploitation and manipulation had cast a wide net, ensnaring countless victims over the years. One by one, they emerged from the shadows, emboldened by the news of her downfall and eager to share their stories. Tales of emotional abuse, financial ruin, and shattered lives poured forth, painting a chilling portrait of a woman utterly devoid of conscience or remorse. The fallout was swift and merciless. Marla's carefully constructed house of cards came crashing down around her, leaving her social standing in tatters, and her once abundant finances drained to the dregs. Through it all, Everett remained a pillar of strength, weathering the storm with a newfound resilience that inspired us all. Gone was the guilt and shame that had once weighed him down. In its place was a steely determination to make amends and move forward. "I can't change the past," he said during one of our many heart-to-heart conversations, "but I can damn well make sure the future is better for all of us." And true to his word, he did. With an unwavering focus, he set about rebuilding the relationships that Marla had so callously fractured, starting with our parents. It was a long and often painful process, fraught with difficult conversations and emotional revelations. But through it all, our family remained united, a bond forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by our shared determination to triumph over Marla's poisonous legacy. As for my role, I took it upon myself to be the mediator, the calm voice of reason that helped guide our family through the turbulent waters of healing. It wasn't always easy, and there were times when tempers flared and progress seemed elusive. But I persevered. drawing strength from the knowledge that we were finally on the right path, a path that led away from the shadows and towards the light of a brighter future. And as the weeks turned into months, that future began to take shape before our very eyes. The rifts that had once seemed insurmountable slowly knitted themselves together, replaced by a newfound appreciation for the unbreakable bonds that tied us as a family. It was during one of our Sunday dinners, the table laden with Mom's famous pot roast, and the air filled with laughter and conversation, that I truly realized how far we had come. Gazing around at the smiling faces of my loved ones, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. We had weathered the storm, emerging battered but unbroken, our love and loyalty to one another stronger than ever before. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. A united front, fortified by the knowledge that the darkness that had once threatened to consume us had finally been banished for good. In the aftermath of Marla's explosive departure, a fragile peace settled over our family. It was as if we had all been holding our collective breath, bracing for the next inevitable blow from her twisted machinations. But as the days stretched into weeks and her poisonous presence faded into a distant memory, we slowly began to exhale. Of course, the road to healing was far from smooth. Marla's betrayal had left deep scars, both emotional and financial. Everett, in particular, struggled with the fallout of her deceit, his once thriving business and personal accounts drained to the dregs by her relentless exploitation. "I feel like such a fool," he confided in me one evening, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "How could I have been so blind, so willing to hand over everything I've worked for to that parasite?" I wrapped an arm around his shoulders, offering what comfort I could. "You were manipulated, Everett. She preyed on your trust and twisted your devotion into a weapon against you. But that's over now." He nodded, his jaw clenched with determination. "You're right. It's time to start rebuilding, to take back what she stole from me, from all of us." And rebuild we did, each of us shouldering a share of the burden. Mom and Dad opened their home to Everett, offering him a sanctuary as he sorted through the tangled mess of his finances. Theo, ever the level-headed voice of reason, helped devise a plan to get Everett's business back on track, utilizing his keen business acumen to plug the leaks and stem the tide of financial ruin. As for me, I became the glue that held our fractured family together. I organized weekly dinners, ensuring we all had a regular opportunity to come together and reconnect. I mediated the difficult conversations, lending an understanding ear and offering gentle guidance when tempers flared. It wasn't easy, and there were times when the strain of it all threatened to overwhelm me. But whenever I felt myself wavering, I would think back to those dark days when Marla's poisonous grip had nearly torn us apart, and I would find the strength to persevere. Slowly but surely the cracks began to mend, and our family emerged from the rubble stronger than ever before. Everett's business flourished under Theo's guidance, and he was able to regain his financial footing, a newfound humility and appreciation for the value of hard work shining through. Mom and Dad, too, seemed rejuvenated by the renewed sense of unity that bound us together. Gone were the hollow-eyed resignation and strained silences that had plagued them during Marla's reign of terror. In their place was a warmth and vibrancy that I hadn't seen in years, a reminder of the unbreakable bonds that had sustained our family through countless storms. And as for me, well, I found myself reinvigorated by the knowledge that my unwavering determination had played a pivotal role in our family's salvation. No longer was I content to be a mere bystander in life, watching from the sidelines as others shaped their destinies. I had tasted the power of taking action, of standing up for what was right, and I knew that I could never go back to the way things were before. It was this newfound sense of purpose that drove me to take on a new challenge: the restoration of our family home. The once proud manor had fallen into disrepair during Marla's toxic tenure, its rooms and halls battered by neglect and the weight of her corrosive presence. But now, with her shadow banished and our family united, I saw an opportunity to breathe new life into the heart of our legacy. Enlisting the help of Everett and Theo, we set about the task of restoring the grand old house to its former glory, stripping away the layers of grime and decay to reveal the beauty that had been hidden beneath. It was backbreaking work, filled with long hours and more than a few heated arguments. But through it all, we persevered, fueled by a shared sense of purpose and the knowledge that every nail hammered, every wall sanded, was a tangible symbol of our family's resilience and rebirth. And when the final coat of paint had dried and the last piece of furniture had been carefully arranged, we stood back and marveled at our handiwork. The house fairly glowed, its polished floors and gleaming woodwork a testament to the power of perseverance and love. It was on a warm summer evening, the air thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers, that we gathered on the front porch to celebrate our victory. Mom and Dad, hand in hand, their faces aglow with pride. Everett and Theo, shoulders brushing as they shared a conspiratorial grin. And me, standing in the midst of it all, my heart swelling with a sense of triumph and unbridled joy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, I raised my glass in a silent toast. To family, to resilience, and to the unbreakable bonds that had carried us through the darkest of storms. For in that moment, bathed in the warmth of the fading light, and surrounded by the people I loved most in this world, I knew that we had truly emerged from the shadows, battered, perhaps, but unbroken and more united than ever before. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with new challenges and obstacles to overcome. But as I looked around at the smiling faces of my loved ones, I felt a surge of confidence and determination. Whatever lay ahead, we would face it together. A family forged in the fires of adversity, tempered by the knowledge that our love and loyalty to one another was unshakable. Marla's poisonous legacy had been purged, and in its place a new chapter was beginning. One written in the bonds of unbreakable family, resilience, and hope for a brighter tomorrow.